You are now entering a dangerous liberty zone where God-given natural rights are held sacred and exercised. This is your warning. Tyranny, fascism, and censorship will not be tolerated. Ideas will be exchanged freely. Rigorous debate and open discourse is encouraged. If you are weak and your beliefs are fragile, you should leave now. Prepare yourself. We are now live on the Dangerous Liberty Podcast. All right, folks, welcome to another episode of the Dangerous Liberty Podcast, where we know that safety at the expense of liberty is slavery. Man, do we got a great show for you tonight. I want to welcome everybody that is tuning in now. And of course, those of you that tune in and watch this after we're live, start joining us every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. This podcast is for you. We want you to join in on the conversation, be part of it, and be part of this community. Real quick, I do want to say hello to the folks I'm seeing over in the comments right now. We got Nub. Good to see you, buddy. Con, John Rollins, Jason TG Sponsor, Jeff Johnson, Gary Shaver, Black Dog 07, Aska Alandi. That's special. Con, Chad Wyckoff, Hank, New York City, JJ, Robert Cochran, and many, many more. Folks, we're live streaming right now on X, Rumble, Facebook, and YouTube. So again, welcome, and make sure you like, subscribe, all those good things. Folks, this is a guest that I'm getting ready to introduce. Number one, he's been on Joe Rogan many times. On top of that, I've been following him independently. I think he's a truth speaker out there. One of the things I've mentioned many times, and I don't think to say that, the food pyramid is to say that it is one of the greatest atrocities ever to be put on the American people. I don't think is an understatement. It has led to more death, destruction, unhealthy lifestyle, and to some extent that information is still being pushed out. So we're going to address some of the things that current medicine still kind of pushes that I think is wrong. And we have a doctor here to talk more about it. But without further ado, I want to go ahead and welcome Dr. Shawn Baker. Dr. Baker, thank you for coming on. We appreciate you coming on, man. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah. Hey, I appreciate you having me. Likewise, it's awesome to talk about this stuff. And sounds like a lot of your audience are either active duty military veterans, so on and so forth. I had my time in the military as well. And it's always great to share information with the folks that, protect us. And I say the same thing, people that feed us. I mean, those are my favorite two groups to talk to, the veterans and the ranchers. And so thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I love it. And hopefully one of these days we'll get you down here and come out and do some shooting with us. Have a good time.
Sounds like fun.
Thank you for your service as well. I didn't realize I looked at your bio that you were in the Air Force, weren't you?
I was, yeah. I spent 11 years in. I spent the first 5 years I spent as a nuclear weapons guy. I was up in Cheyenne, Wyoming, out there manning the nuclear weapon silo. And then I went back in as a trauma surgeon, spent time over in Afghanistan and did all kinds of, the crazy trauma stuff for a period of time. And so had kind of two little separate military careers.
When were you in Afghanistan?
I was there in 2007. So pretty busy time. There was pretty, there was pretty high tempo was going on at that time. We were very, very busy, for sure.
Yeah. I was there in 2010 and 11, 2010 and 11.
Yeah.
And Iraq 07, 08, and then also with the initial push in. So yeah, no. Well, again, thank you for your service. I wasn't aware of that. That's another element that is interesting for sure. So, if you will, Doc, for those of you that don't know you, that have been living under a rock somewhere, tell everybody a little bit about yourself and kind of what you're known for and what your kind of mission in life is now.
Yeah. So like I said, I went to medical school, became a surgeon, orthopedic surgeon. I'd spent some time doing trauma surgery overseas. Had a pretty normal career as an orthopedic surgeon, fixing broken bones, replacing knees, replacing hips, doing sports medicine. And I was kind of humming along, doing pretty well. I was the head of a surgical group. And, somewhere around, 2012, I got interested in nutrition for my own personal reasons. I've always been an athlete my whole life. I've been working out for I'm almost 60. I've been working out for 45 years. Competed in sports, world champion in multiple different sports now. And, I just noted in my 40s, I was like, I'm just not feeling that good. I was pretty heavy guy. I was about 280, 290, I'm 6'5", so I'm a pretty big dude. And I was just like, I got to fix my nutrition because I'm just getting old and I don't like it. And so I started playing with all these nutritional, strategies. I dropped like 50 pounds in 3 months. I got done. I remember I was competing in something called the Highland Games, which is, you put on a kilt and you throw heavy stuff, these telephone poles, cabers, which look like telephone poles. And I had to be about 290 at 6'5", 290. I was one of the smaller dudes. I mean, because most of these guys are like 6'7", 340. And so I was just, kind of strong enough to compete. And so I said, well, I'm done doing that. So I leaned down to about 230. I went on this kind of low fat, a lot of, vegetables, fibers, lean protein. And I did lose weight, but I was friggin' miserable, man. I was just so hungry. And the nurses at the hospital were like, man, we like the fat Dr. Baker way, way better. You're just kind of an ass, So I was like, so this wasn't sustainable. So anyway, I kind of worked my way through the different nutritional, strategies. And I ended up, doing this low carb stuff, ketogenic stuff for a while. And during that period of time, it so happened that as an orthopedic community, we were operating just a lot of obese people. That's just what, their joints often wear out. And the people with a lot of obesity end up having more complications when you take them to surgery. They would have more infections, they would have more blood clots, they wouldn't rehab as well. And so we were like, well, as a community, we said, hey, we need to do something about all these obese patients. Let's ensure they lose weight before we bring them to the OR rather than dealing with their complications. So all of us in the whole community said, okay, let's do that. But they didn't tell you how you get them to lose weight. It was like, well, how am I going to make them lose weight? Because no one ever does. So my strategy was to put people on these low carb ketogenic diets. And not everybody would do it, of course, but some would. And what I was seeing was that people would come back to me like 2 weeks later, because I'd say, hey, try your diet, come back in 2 weeks, we'll see how it's going. Very often, if not the majority of the time, the people who would actually do the diet would start saying, you know what, doc, I know we got a knee replacement scheduled in 2 months or whatever when I was on my schedule. They said, but my knee's not hurting anymore. And that was kind of like this aha moment to me. It's like, wait a minute, you get your x-rays look like, somebody took your bones out, fed it to a dog, let them gnaw on it for a while, and put it back in there. So it's destroyed. But they weren't having pain. So I said, well, if there's no pain, there's not really an indication for surgery. That's the primary indication is, you're in a lot of pain.
Right.
So that was just kind of something that was, interesting to me. And I got pretty excited because by that time I'd done thousands of surgeries. It was just another day at the office, surgery. So I was like, so I was pretty cool. This was exciting to me. And I brought it up to the hospital administration because even though I was the head of the surgical group, I said, you know what, guys, I'm pretty excited about this. This is really cool. I'd like to spend, a half a day a week, just kind of talk about lifestyle and nutrition with my patients. 'Cause I didn't have time. I was seeing patients every 5 minutes, in an orthopedic surgery office, you're seeing 50 patients a day. Right. And so that went over like a lead balloon. They're like, no, we're not paying you for that. So they didn't want me to do that. And then, eventually I just said, you know what, I'm gonna do it anyway. Cause I really want to make a difference for the patients. So the long story short of that is I ended up leaving medicine and got into basically just kind of lifestyle related stuff. And then during that journey, I was kind of really just diving into the literature, learning about nutrition, how it applied to various aspects of disease and health. And I come across this group of people eating only meat. And I was like, this is bizarre. These people are nuts. What the hell's wrong with these people? You thinking the usual thing. Mm-hmm. Where are they going to get their vitamin C from? What about their fiber and vitamin and all that stuff is all going through my mind. But they seem to be doing well. And they were like happy and they're talking about crazy stuff. Yeah, my diabetes went away. Yeah, this autoimmune disease went away. And I thought, this is really bizarre. So after about a year of kind of interacting with this crazy group of people, I said, I'm going to try it and see what happens. And this is back in 2016. And I had kind of a small following on Twitter at the time, about 3,000-4,000 people following me. And I said, hey guys, they were all kind of people, low carb, diet people, a few physicians said, hey, I'm going to do this crazy all meat diet for a month. And I know I'm going to die. And I took a little poll. What am I going to die of? Heart disease, my arteries are going to clog up, whatever. Right. And so I do a month and I don't die. And in fact, I feel great. I was like, this is, I was 50 at the time. I just turned 50. And I was like, this is the best I felt in 20 years. I've had chronic knee pain. I've had, aches and pains, and that all went away. I thought that was just normal aging. Even as an orthopedic surgeon, I was like, well, it's just what happens when you're 50. Mm-hmm. So, I got so much better. And then I kind of convinced I remember in that year, I convinced 100 people to do it for 90 days. And we tracked a bunch of stuff. We tracked their, what they ate, their weight, their waist size, their heart rate, all the subjective stuff, their bowel movements. And it was amazing. It was like the average person lost 30 pounds. Their waist size went down 8 centimeters. Their resting heart rate went down by like 10 beats a minute. All their subjective stuff, their sleep, their joint pain, their gut health, their libido, their mental health, all got better. And so we started talking about this. And then again, apparently this is back in, 2017, Rogan got wind of it and he sort of invites me on the show. And I really didn't, I knew who he was a little bit, but I didn't really follow a lot of what was going on. I didn't realize the impact that he would have. And so I go on Rogan's podcast, and then of course there's a lot of eyes on me all of a sudden. And then of course, every vegan on the planet thinks I'm the Antichrist. I mean, oh my God, this guy can't be like me. So I get that. But, then a book company, Victory Belt, contacted me, say, hey, could you please write a book about this stuff? And I was like, I don't like writing. I said, I like recess and PE when I was a kid. I hated writing. So anyway, I read the book. I call it the Carnivore Diet, because before they were calling it zero carb or something different. I said, I'm going to call this the Carnivore Diet and put it out there. And that was published in I think November of 2019, and sold well, did pretty well. And now there are hundreds of thousands, if not, a few million people that have now dabbled in the carnivore diet or some version of that. And, and I see a comment here about somebody saying they lost weight. And yeah, we say it all the time. And then, so recently, the last several years, I had a person come up to me that was a entrepreneur out of Silicon Valley and said, I've done your diet and it cured my autoimmune disease. And I really want to make something of this. And so we've been working together for about 5 years. We formed a company called Revero, which is a 50-state national healthcare company, digital healthcare company. It's revero.com, revero.com. And we basically take people that are sick with autoimmune disease, metabolic disease, inflammatory diseases, and we take care of their nutrition. We start to, the thing I will tell you about healthcare is it is designed to be kind of a treadmill. It's just wrap it in, wrap it out. The more people you see, the quicker you can turn people over, the more you're incentivized. And what's happened with physicians' incentives is just high volume throughput, get them in, get them out, get them on their drugs, right? And this is what does not help people when it comes to actually treating or providing health. I mean, it's symptomatic management. Here's your symptoms, here's a pill. And that's why, honestly, healthcare is a lot of it's going to go to AI, because, a trained monkey can do that,
Right.
Here's a set of symptoms. Here's your pills. Here's your lab value. Here's your pills. And yes, it manages the symptoms. It can change the lab markers around, but it doesn't really get at the cause of the issue. And the cause of the issue more often than not is lifestyle nutrition, as I'm sure you guys are aware. The problem is we've been telling people for years that either lifestyle doesn't work, which most people believe, most physicians believe, we tried it. They never do it. Here's your pill. Or that the lifestyle that's appropriate is to eat the food pyramid, right? Eat a bunch of low fat stuff, bunch of grains, bunch of vegetables, eat a molecule of meat once a week, just for the heck of it. And that's a real problem. That's why it's not sustainable for folks. And so that's kind of, and then, I've kept up my competitive career, as a carnivore guy, guy just eating meat. I've broken multiple world records, concept too. I don't know if you're familiar with that as a rowing thing.
Yes.
Jiu-jitsu, doing all this stuff that, most guys my age are not able to do, just because I feel good. I mean, that's the honest truth. I mean, I obviously I have the work ethic. I've been training my whole life, but at a certain point, people get beat up. You see a lot of old lifters are like, my shoulders are all jacked up. My back's all jacked up from all the years of lifting. And I think it's not so much the lifting as much as it is probably the cardiometabolic, just general metabolic states that you've developed, probably a lot of it due to diet and poor sleep and all those other factors that go into that.
Yeah. And I think one of the things too is you talked about guys that are staying active in their 40s and beyond. The other thing that I was just talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he was talking about, we had a lady on recently talking about, hormone replacement therapy and TRT. And he was talking about that, and he's almost in his 50s, a little bit older than me. And, I was like, well, how much, he's talking about how he's broke down all the time. He wants to start looking at TRT. And I was like, well, what's your protein intake? And, the idea is ultimately they're also, trying to lose weight. So we're minimizing macros. But the other thing is, if you don't have the protein to maintain muscle, to build muscle, you're not going to have any muscle. So, that's one of the things that the carnivore diet definitely addresses, among many other things, obviously. And I think,
yeah, you're definitely not going to be protein deficient. And, I'm almost 60, I'm 58, and I'm still deadlifting 600 pounds. I'll be dunking basketballs and sprinting and all the stuff I'm still able to do. And I think, certainly there are a lot of guys that are suffering from the clinical signs and symptoms of low testosterone. That's clear. Now, the problem is most of it is a side effect of poor lifestyle. And, you tell people, hey, stop drinking beer, stop staying up all night, not getting sleep, stop eating garbage, And if you can do that consistently for a period of time, you'd be amazed at how much better you'll feel. And the testosterone replacement industry is about a $4 billion industry right now. And so you get a lot of people that are it's just band-aids, and I would see that. And a lot of guys, particularly if they don't do the lifestyle, that testosterone anyway gets, turned into estrogen anyway. So it often makes it worse. Your testosterone level's up, but you're still fat. You're still out of shape. So you still got to put in the work. And you're absolutely right. The average American, male or female of any age, eats an abysmally low amount of protein. Our RDA is, 0.8 grams per kilogram, which is like, it keeps you from dying amount, but it's not anywhere near optimal. It's just kind of like the bare minimum. And we've had this, kind of this, it's kind of interesting. Nutrition, if we go back to the very creation of nutrition science in the United States, it started in 1917 with something called the American Dietetics Association, right? And this is founded by two women, one whose name was Lena Cooper. And Lena Cooper was a Seventh-day Adventist, a woman who believed that that vegetarianism is the true religious way to eat, that red meat was evil. It's the same, if you guys remember John Harvey Kellogg, who was this wacko nutty guy that started Kellogg's, and they thought that red meat led to lustful thoughts and masturbation and these sort of impure urges. And there's some truth to that. I mean, because it improves your sex life for sure, but they wanted to ban that. And so this is, even today, if you look at like all of these nutritional governing bodies, the American Dietetics Association or Dietetics and Nutrition Associations, Seventh-day Adventists still massively overrepresented in those groups. And they have this kind of bias against red meat. So we've been fighting that for a long time. And then there's also this huge financial incentive, because, what we see with ultra processed foods is they're more profitable. They're cheap ingredients that they sell at a big markup. So you make more money on this stuff. And then, of course, you have the side effect, everybody's sick, and then the pharmaceutical companies are happy because they're like, man, we got all the drugs we can peddle people. So, it's turning though, as you guys are probably aware. More and more people are saying, I think the whole debacle of the last 4 or 5 years with COVID and the nonsense that we went through, a lot of people are saying that was total BS, and they're kind of waking up to this. And so like I just saw a nice survey. It was actually done in Europe, and they looked at 5 nations on their attitudes towards red meat for the first time ever since they've been doing this poll over decades. People in the UK are saying we're going to eat more red meat. It's like 9% more people are saying we want to eat red meat. And the reason they're giving is health, because they're understanding that this is actually very healthy for us. And so we're kind of slowly dismantling all the propaganda. It's like you have to reverse, you've been hypnotized. Now we got to spin that hypnotizing wheel back the other way to get people to start to understand this stuff. And so, yeah, it's interesting times.
Yeah. I've also noticed that with a lot of processed foods, it seems like, not only are they cheap ingredients, but there's also ingredients that are byproducts that industries basically want to get rid of. They're waste products, and they're putting those into the processed foods as well as a way to get rid of them and passing it off as food to the
this is largely how the cereal industry was formed, because cereal initially, all this kind of pressed corn and stuff like that was just discarded. It was literally agricultural waste. And so we said, you know what, we could mold it into shapes and throw a little sugar on it and throw some vitamins on it and feed it to people. And that's exactly right. We are being fed waste products. We're being fed all this, as there's just so much junk that's put in there.
Oils.
It's, the seed oils, obviously those were not part of the human diet up until, like the late 1800s. So they're obviously not our natural diet. And we've got all these ingredients now that have never really been tested. It's surprising, since I think something like since the year 2000, something like, I don't know, it's like 2,000 ingredients that have this, what's called generally recognized as safe moniker on that, which means it doesn't kill rats right away when you feed it to them. So we think it's safe for humans. And that's all the test. And literally, that's kind of all the testing they get. There's not much more than that. So does it cause diabetes? Does it cause autoimmune disease? Does it cause dementia? No idea. We don't know because it's never been tested. So it's kind of like we've got this giant population experiment, and it looks like it's not doing well. You know, you can look around the population. Everybody's fat, sick, depressed. You know, it's clear that we're basically slowly poisoning ourselves. I look at a lot of the ultra processed junk food kind of like a recreational drug because it has that effect. You know, I had a gal that was, you know, she was a food chemist, a food scientist that spent like, I don't know, 30 years working in the industry. She was at the end of her career, like in her 60s. And she emailed me and said, I'd love to talk to you. I would like to work for your company because I just have so much guilt about what I did. And I asked her, what was her job? What did she do? And she said, well, I was a chemist. And my job was literally to make this food as addictive as possible. I mean, that was her job, to intentionally make it addictive. And so they've done that, and they know that. I mean, as you guys know, the tobacco companies bought the food companies. You know, when RJ Reynolds and all those companies were you know, kind of broken up, they went and bought Nabisco and all these other companies and just, you know, switched their business model to the food version of tobacco. So yeah, and so a lot of people are stuck. I mean, that's the problem, is you get people that want to eat healthier, but they're addicted. They're literally addicts. And it's tough to deal with, particularly when you tell them you got to go, well, you just need to start eating salad and lentils. And they're like, no, thanks. It ain't going to work. Give me the Ozempic shots. You know, this is where we're at right now in the US.
Yeah.
The Ozempic thing is nuts. And there's just, there was just an article the other day talking about how I guess some people are experiencing blindness from Ozempic. And, you know, this is another drug that they're pushing out. As I posted on X the other day that, like, you know, because, you know, eat less, exercise more doesn't make people money. So that's not what's being prescribed. Real quick, I do want to say over in the comments, folks, we will definitely, I'm actually highlighting some of your questions, and we will definitely bring those up as we get a little bit more time into this. And so continue to ask questions. If you want to save your questions for when I open it up to the floor, I will. You're welcome to do that, but I am highlighting the ones that good comments as well as questions, and we will definitely get you in here and talk more as we go.
Now, Dr. Baker, correct me if I'm wrong, but for the first time in U.S. history, the average life expectancy, has that begun to trend downward now for the first time?
Yeah, for about the last 3 years, I think it's gone down. I mean, I think we peaked at about, on an average life expectancy, somewhere around 77, 78. Yeah, that's down a year or two. That's come down a little bit. So yeah, I mean, we're the first generation, or the generation being born right now is the first generation to have a decrease in life expectancy, which is horrendous. I mean, you think about that. That's absolutely, you know, as much wealth and knowledge and technology that we have. I mean, we did some really good things with life expectancy by, you know, cleaning up the water supply and working on sanitation stuff and adequately nourishing people so they don't starve to death. But now we have the opposite problem. We have everybody just obese and getting all these diseases of excess. And so, yeah. And we spend, you know, near $5 trillion a year in healthcare in the United States, and our results are abysmal. And this is part of this RFK Maha stuff. They're saying, look, enough is enough. But I've been on this message for at least a decade, saying, look, we gotta turn things around. So yeah, we do have to change the way we do healthcare, because healthcare, you know, when I was, you know, like I said, I started in healthcare in 1989 when I started medical school. And I remember somewhere, and I don't remember what year it came in, but people started talking about this concept of disease management. And I'd never heard that before, you know, and I was like, what does disease management mean? And so it turns out it just means that you put people on drugs for the rest of their life. That's disease management. And so that's the care model we have now. And so this is why drugs like Ozempic and the other, you know, GLP-1 receptor agonists are being pushed so hard, because it's a drug you got to take for obesity. Is just like hypertension. It's a disease you got to take drugs for. You wouldn't tell somebody to stop taking their hypertensive pills. Well, you would if you fixed their damn lifestyle, you know. Right. But it's just like we're in the same sort of situation where it's like, well, we're just going to take these $1,000 a month drugs for the rest of their life. Yeah, I mean, people are, you know, Novo Nordisk, Eli Lilly's going, yeah, you know, if I can get 100 million Americans on that stuff, we're buying, you know, 6 homes on the Amalfi Coast, and we're buying our super yachts and all this stuff. So yeah, it's absolutely insane how we do healthcare. And well, I hesitate to call it healthcare. I call it, you know, a lot of people would call it sick care.
Yeah, you're just managing symptoms, but not actually curing the disease.
Now I know, Doc, you actually had some, once you got kind of started becoming more public on this, if I remember correctly from, I don't know if I heard it on one of your social media or Rogan, but they actually tried to take your medical license away, correct?
Yeah. And in fact, they did for a period of time, so I was, like I said, as I mentioned, I was at this hospital. I was, recommending for lifestyle stuff. I'm a pretty stubborn guy, and they said no. And I said, F you, I'm going to do it anyway. So, we went through this long legal battle, and they filed a complaint against me with the state and said, he's not, competent to practice. And so the state said, well, you can fight it at the state board level. We can get to you in about a year and a half. And it's going to cost you about $250,000. And I was like, or they said, or you can temporarily resign your license and go get independently evaluated outside of this. And I said, I'll do that, because I don't want to wait 2 years and spend all that money. So I went out and got independently evaluated, and they said, there's nothing wrong with what you do. Go back to work. Right. That was, but it took another 2 years for that process to fold out. And by that time I was so pissed off, and I was already on my other thing. So I lost my license for about 2 years and got it back. And, I still have an active medical license, but because I'm so, so at the point where I'm just jaded and frustrated with it, I'm not going back to that stuff. And I'm having, as an orthopedic surgeon, I'd operated on thousands of patients, and I had, a lot of people said, hey doc, thanks for making my knee feel better or fixing my broken bone. And that was cool. It was really good. It was rewarding. And I think people that do that, it's great. However, it pales in comparison to what I get today. I mean, today I get people that are like, I was suicidally depressed. I had MS. I couldn't get out of my bed. My life was over. And now I've got my life back. I'm back able to work. I'm able to walk again. I have a new child. I mean, it's really, the level of reach and impact and the life altering improvements I see now are night and day different. They're so much more rewarding. And so I'm just so lucky. I mean, it was kind of like, I was really angry at the time. It was like a really, sort of rotten situation. I was like, what the hell? I'm just trying to do the right thing. And here I am getting kind of raked over the coals because I'm going against the system. And we're seeing that now more physicians, like, particularly when we saw people speaking out against COVID, a lot of physicians were threatened with their license to being cut off. A lot of people got fired because they said, look, I don't think this is ethically the right thing to do. And I was this happened to me 7 or 8 years before all the COVID stuff happened, but it still happens. I mean, those incentives, if you start costing them money, they don't give a crap who you are. They don't care that you're a military veteran. They don't care that you've had a spotless record. It's like, we don't want you in this. We don't want you potentially losing us money, and that was, for me, it was, it was tens of millions of dollars. It wasn't that, it's a lot of money, but it wasn't that much money. You'd think, you'd want to, sort of sabotage someone's career over a few, I guess it is. People kill people for $20. So when it's, $10-50 million and all, they'll do some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Now, what was their justification other than that you were promoting a carnivore low carb diet? Like what was the actual complaint?
So it was basically what it was they selected me for something called peer review. So what happens is hospitals have this process where it's really like, it's a really unfair process in that they don't have to tell you what they're accusing you of. They're saying, we think you did something wrong. And you're, what was it? Well, we can't tell you. What do you mean you can't tell me? Well, that's just the way it is. We have to protect the patients and the people that are telling on you, that protect you from the whistleblower. So it's really clandestine. And then so what they do is they say, well, we've selected some of your patients and we had one of our reviewers that disagreed. And it's kind of funny. The guy they chose to review my case, it was my direct financial competitor. And I said, well, that's not cool, because we were taking a lot of money away. We were taking a lot of business away from those guys. In fact, when I got in there were 2 surgeons and I grew it to 12, and we started taking a lot of money from the main group in town. And they used one of their guys, that was friends with the president of the hospital to sort of review my stuff. And I said, that doesn't seem fair. And so they said, well, we're going to send it to an outside reviewer. And it was supposed to be independent, but it wasn't. They basically just pre-marked it and said, these are the things we disagree with. And then they still wouldn't show me anything. They're like, we can't show you what you're accused of. And so they said, well, we're going to meet with this panel of pediatricians and anesthesiologists and radiologists and no orthopedic surgeons. I wasn't allowed to be there. And they said, well, we've decided that because we disagree with some of your cases, some of the things, eventually I sued them. And I got to see what they were complaining of. And it was so crazy ridiculous. Like, I mean, this gets really technical and kind of boring stuff, but it was like, I was doing something called a reverse shoulder replacement. And that was like several of the cases. And a reverse shoulder replacement is basically you have a ball and a socket, on your shoulder, and reverse, basically you flip it around. You basically put the ball where the socket is and the socket where the ball is. And that sounds crazy and weird, but it works really well for certain indications for people that don't have a rotator cuff anymore. There's no stability holding in, so it becomes more stable. And that's what it was originally cleared for the FDA to do. But over the years, a lot of people started using it for trauma and other indications. And I was using it for, these other indications. And the patients were doing fine. I mean, there was like, you look at their patient records, and they're like, they're doing fine. There's no problem. But because the indication wasn't a strict FDA indication, even though locally and nationally, all these surgeons were doing it, I said, well, you're not allowed to, you can't do that. And therefore, stuff like that. And then they had stuff where like x-rays, or like they confused the pre-op date with the post-op date. They were pulling the wrong op reports. And I was like, this is crazy. This is just so backwards. And so I had this kind of this fair hearing trial. And it was supposed to be independent, that no one from a competing group could be in charge of it. And they choose this other surgeon. And I said, well, he works for the other group. And they said, no, I don't. He just retired, so it doesn't count anymore. I'm like, he's still got a financial vested interest. He gets retirement kick. So it was so goofy. And I mean, later the CFO of the hospital later told me, hey, they totally screwed you. I saw them screw you over. So anyway, it was just one of those things where, it's just so, it shattered my faith and my belief in the system in many ways. I was kind of naive. I came in the military. It was just like, work hard. And, obviously there's crazy stuff in the military too, but I was like, if you do the right thing, you should be rewarded.
Right.
But if the right thing conflicts with the bottom line, then all bets are off with that. So anyway, like I said, I went to an independent group. They completely exonerated it and said, look, you're totally fine. And so that was the deal. So it was like 2 years where I was pretty pissed off, angry, depressed, sad guy that didn't know what the hell I was going to do. Cause I was like, I spent, all this time and effort learning how to be a surgeon, 13 years of medical school and residency and college. And all of a sudden, well, we don't want you to do that anymore. And so anyway, I've got a little bit of a chip on my shoulder from that, quite honestly. So this is why I'm so, motivated to sort of, push back on the system.
No, I mean, I'm sure at the time it felt like your whole world was crashing down around you. And I'm just glad you had the courage to do it, because I think like you said, the effects of, I don't think, maybe you do realize, but I don't think you realize, and most people out there realize, the effect that you have had. And of course, coming on Rogan, of course, helps, project that. And even, I listen to him all the time. He's always bringing you up all the time. It's not like you were just on there. You've been on there, what, 3 times?
No, twice. Yeah, twice I've been on there.
It's not like that's the only thing. He's constantly talking about the carnivore diet. So, yeah. You've had a major effect, everything that you did there. Then obviously you went on Rogan, he found you, and the continued effect that it's had on the national discussion for health and nutrition, is crazy profound. So, the courage that you had to do that, it took a lot, and I'm sure it was shitty at the time. But, I think the rewards, are profound, and to say the least. So,
yeah, I fortunately had a very supportive, partner, my at that time girlfriend, now wife, was super supportive. I had some pretty good coping mechanisms. I was like I said, I started jumping rope, man. It was like a stress relief. I had 3,000 jump ropes, just trying to just kind of not numb my mind. I was in there, jump rope. Just trying to, because I had a lot of anger and hatred, and, want to just strangle these people, and, getting through that, and just trying to, despondent about the future. And it was a tough time, but fortunately I didn't go get drunk or do drugs or anything. Like a lot of people, they'll turn to that. They'll just start getting drunk all the time. And I was like, that's just not who I am. And fortunately that was probably what kept me, because a lot of physicians that go through stuff like that end up, killing themselves, and all kinds of bad stuff happens. And so fortunately I had enough of at least basic coping mechanisms that I could get through that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
At the end of the day, it seems like it led you, like you said earlier, this is much more rewarding, and you feel like you're having such a profound impact on your patients' lives, that even though you went through all that, it led you to a path that you may not have gone down had had that not happened to you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If that had not happened, I'd still be, you know, plugging away doing knee replacements. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And probably reasonably happy, you know, probably wealthier than I am now, to be honest. But at the same time, I think, you know, if I look at it, you know, if I zone out, because I'm still, what is it? We're in 20, I'm about 10 years out. I think I'm just kind of at the point where I think it was worth it, you know, like all things considered.
Right.
And I think 10 years from now, it'll really be worth it, you know, because
Right.
I think the impact is going to be pretty big. I think that, you know, just moving the entire, you know, like I said, I don't want to say, you know, I think I had some role in changing the discussion around nutrition in this country, and then maybe healthcare. I mean, there's a lot of people that are obviously involved in this stuff, but I think I've had at least somewhat of an impact. And you're right. I mean, the first time I went on Rogan, I mean, he was looking at me like I was nuts. I remember sitting across from him and telling this guy to eat meat, and he was like, "Man, dude, you're nuts." I mean, you could just tell, right? And the second time I went on Rogan, he was like raving about it, like, "Oh my God, everybody," you know. So I was just like, you know, it's funny how, and there was 6 years difference between those two shows, how much things have changed over the last, you know, nearly decade. It got to where when I started talking about this, everybody on the planet thought I was nuts. It was like, you know, and now only like 99% of the people think I'm nuts. So there's some improvement.
You're winning hearts and minds.
A little bit.
Well, let's talk about, you know, the carnivore diet specifically, and maybe get into a little bit about, you know, cholesterol markers, you know, what the norm is, what they actually mean, how they relate to overall cardiovascular health, and kind of go from there. And I am curious, you know, you've been on the carnivore diet for now, what, 12, 13 years straight, you said?
Well, no, I've been on, this is my 9th year that I've been doing it. I was on low carb ketogenic diets for about 5 years prior to that. So, you know, I've been eating a lot of meat the whole time. I mean, a whole life basically. So I've been eating, you know, now I consume on average about 3 pounds of steak a day. I mean, I've been doing so for, you know, almost 9 years. And so I put down a lot of steak. So if anybody is like the, you know, the results of a lot of meat, it's me for sure.
You're the case study.
Yeah. So now, is there any other supplementation that you do on a regular basis?
I don't do anything like supplementation other than sometimes I'll take electrolytes, you know, and that's just because I sweat a lot, because I'm always, you know, as you probably know, I'm up working out, running, jumping, jujitsu, whatever it might be. And you sweat
like nobody's business.
Yeah, something like that.
So, I mean, you don't take it like a daily vitamin. You don't. No other real supplementation whatsoever. I don't feel that it makes much of a difference. You know, I was a guy over the years, you know, because like I said, I've been an athlete, I've been training, lifting weights, you know, supplements over the, you know, protein powders, I've taken plenty. I took creatine when it came out. I've taken a few of these various little things over the years, and I'm not sure which of them made much of a difference. And honestly, I think creatine's okay. I think protein's okay. But I'm eating so much damn steak, I'm getting a bunch of creatine, I'm getting a bunch of protein. So it becomes, you know, kind of superfluous, and I don't really think I need it. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about like some of the markers, which might be an interesting discussion, particularly around things like cholesterol, because that's, you know, a lot of people say, well, that's great and all, you know, you maybe, you know, because this is what I see. And I've seen this thousands and thousands of times at this point. People go carnivore, and the use case that I like to talk about is for sick people. I think it is a wonderful therapeutic tool. 3 months, 6 months, a year, something like that. You've got ulcerative colitis, you've got Crohn's disease, you've got psoriasis, you've got rheumatoid arthritis, you've got depression, even PTSD. And I know a lot of military folks, PTSD is a big issue, but we see a lot of people with PTSD actually improve significantly when you fix your diet. I think that's I think that's hugely nutritional based.
I do too.
I think there's a lot of things, but I think nutrition, diet, alcohol, of course, there's a lot of things there that you can get into.
Yeah, for sure. So we see this every day, and, you know, so people are like, well, that's cool. And what I often see is people will go on the diet and they'll lose 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds, and their mental health will improve, and their gut will improve, and whatever autoimmune condition will improve. And they'll say, I felt great. I mean, I literally felt like 15, 20 years younger, but my cholesterol went up. My doctor said I can't do this anymore. And I think that's such a shame, because what we're now understanding about cholesterol is that it's really kind of context dependent, you know, because a lot of times, and we know, like right now, we know the reason why cholesterol goes up when people go on a low carb diet. And it's not because they're eating a bunch of saturated fat. That has a minimal impact. It's really because as they get leaner. And many people do. And so what I can do is, if you take someone who's really overweight and you put them on any kind of low carb diet, doesn't matter if it's, you know, low carb, ketogenic, carnivore diet, most of the time what will happen is their cholesterol will not change or go down, right? But once they start getting lean or lose enough weight, something shifts in the metabolism. And so the way that energy is sort of trafficked in our blood to get to our cells, it kind of comes through our liver first. And so when we're depleted of glycogen, so we don't have a lot of carbohydrates on board, our liver then is forced to traffic more fat to fuel our cellular needs, right? So that's the situation in someone who's lean and low carb. They don't have a lot of stored fat on them. They don't have a lot of stored energy, and they don't have a lot of glycogen. And so the liver takes whatever little body fat is in their body, breaks it down, repackages it up, puts it into these lipoproteins, and shifts it on out so we can feed our cells. And that leads to this really profound elevation in LDL cholesterol, total cholesterol, sometimes HDL, and then something called ApoB, which is kind of the newest marker that people are concerned about. And generally, that is a bad scenario for most people in the normal population. So because normally what you see that in is someone who's, you know, kind of obese or metabolically sick, they're maybe pre-diabetic, the kind of average American, their cholesterol is high. That's certainly increasing the risk for heart disease. And so the answer is, well, let's get their cholesterol down to zero, as low as possible, right? And so we put them on all these drugs, maybe tell them to eat, you know, go eat cardboard and, you know, some leaves, and maybe that'll help you. But in the case that you have this high cholesterol in someone who's otherwise metabolically healthy and on a low carb diet, recent data, in fact, I was just at a movie premiere in Vegas this weekend. A friend of mine, Dave Feldman, who has been studying this for about a decade now, and has done a number of studies. They've just published a bunch of studies on looking at these specific groups of population. So these are people that are specifically healthy looking. They're lean. They're not diabetic. They don't have high blood pressure. They have low triglycerides, but they have really, really high cholesterol. And they compared that group to another group, like equally age matched, you know, everything was appropriate. They were identical groups. One group had LDL cholesterol that was 200, 300, 400, 500, 600. And the other group had LDL cholesterol like 120, like low, normal. And they did high precision CT angiography, where they took, you know, squirted dye into the vessels, and they did a CT scan to see how much plaque was in there. And surprisingly, the people with the high cholesterol had less plaque than the people with the low cholesterol. And then they followed them they've got 5-year data, and then they followed them up for another year. And they saw that some of the people that had a little bit of plaque with the high cholesterol actually saw regression, where it actually went away, and the other ones pretty much didn't progress. So it's kind of, you know, showing that there's more nuance here, that, you know, not everybody, it's not a reflex, brainless algorithm, cholesterol high, take med, you know. So it has to be like, what else is going on? And really, I mean, there's a lot of data that shows that really diabetes is the real issue when it comes to heart disease. You know, you look at like the Women's Health Initiative, where they had, I think, 150,000 patients followed over like 30 years, and they found by far and away diabetes like 10-fold risk increase, you know, LDL cholesterol like 1.3, you know, fold increase. So it's like such a huge difference. So if anything, you want to have good glycemic control. You don't want to be fat, you know, you don't want to be metabolically sick, you don't have hypertension. Those things have a much bigger impact on cardiovascular disease than does what's your LDL cholesterol, which is what we've been obsessed with because we have a drug that fixes it. Whereas before, those other issues weren't well treated with drugs. Now the GLP-1 receptors, the Ozempics and whatnot, will be using that as an off-label use or as a secondary indication. And that's the thing, because that drug will be worth $500 billion, $1 trillion, they're going to push that. Now they're going to start to say, oh, well, the mechanism is now this, because we've already kind of squeezed all the juice out of that lemon that was, you know, statins. Now we're going to squeeze this next big juicy, you know, drug. So we're going to see more discussion around that, when the whole thing could be treated with lifestyle anyway for a hell of a lot cheaper with less side effects. You know, you're not going to have people going blind or having their gut paralyzed or getting pancreatic cancer or, you know, suicidality or all the other things that these drugs will eventually show a lot of people to have problems with.
Well, you know, you actually, I think it was the last time you were on Rogan. I've listened to both your episodes multiple times, just trying to digest it all. But about 6-7 months ago, I went in. I go to the VA. We got actually a pretty good VA nearby, And so I went there for a, just checkup. They did blood work, and they're like, Gary, you know what? Your cholesterol is high. It's like 211. So they bring me to the cardiologist. He's looking through there, and there was some other things that I'd experienced like the year prior. He's like, you know what? We need to put you on some statins, man. You need to get this down. And I was like, I am not going on statins. I was like, let's do a calcium scan. And I remember you had mentioned a calcium scan before on the show.
Right.
And the cardiologist looked at me like I had something growing on my forehead. He's like, how do you know about a calcium scan? I was like, well, old Doc Baker squared me away. So he's like, all right, well, look, at the VA, we only do calcium scans one time for patients. And he's like, all right, we'll do a calcium scan for you. So we scheduled a calcium scan, and then come to find out, my calcium scan came back 0.
Right.
Of course, we went away from the idea of, and like I said, I believe my overall cholesterol was 211. My LDL was slightly elevated, but other than that, I was perfectly fine. And,
But as long as I've known you, your cholesterol has always been slightly elevated. That's been your norm.
Yep.
Well, here, but 211, I mean, if you look at it like 50 years ago, anything under 300 was normal. And, if you look at like longevity data tables, there's a really nice study out of Korea. It's got 12 million people in it. It's a huge study. And they found the people with the lowest mortality, the cholesterol range was between 210 and 240 total cholesterol. Those people had the lowest mortality, right? And so it's like, and then again, a 0 calcium score, and I don't know how old you are, but I mean, a 0 calcium score is pretty good, solid predictivity. It's way more predictive than what your LDL cholesterol is. And so, I don't know, I say we're only going to do it once. I mean, even the American Heart Association will recognize that as a so-called de-risking strategy. Like if you have somebody that's like otherwise healthy, their cholesterol's high, get a calcium score. If it's 0, then the discussion around statins goes away. And the fact that many physicians don't even tell their patients, like you, only because you had enough education to ask about it was the only reason it's done. If you didn't know that, you'd be on a statin right now. And you might be developing, side effects, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an important, for me, I'm a guy, there are people in the low carb community that will say cholesterol doesn't matter, ignore it completely. I'm not that guy. But what I will say is if you come back and it's really high, to me, it just means get more information, right? I mean, it's a flag, but you kind of figure out what's going on holistically, nuanced, maybe some imaging like you did. And then you can say, is this truly a problem? Or is it something that I can just kind of ignore or at least check on it periodically, which is probably more realistic. No, I would probably tell you, Gary, do you mind sharing your age? I don't know how old you are.
44. I'm 44.
44. So yeah, I mean, 0 at 44, the majority of people at 44 are going to have a 0. When you start getting 50, 60, you start seeing a little bit more. So, I mean, I would say, as of 2025, maybe 3-5 years, you repeat it again, see what's going on, particularly if the cholesterol is going to run high or higher. I mean, I don't think 211 is that high, quite honestly. But now 5 years from now, we're going to have so much more data, and we may be able to just say, hey, based on all your other risk profile, you can ignore it. So I think what you've done right now is probably fine. Because I'm looking at you, you look like you're fit, you're in shape, you look like you work out pretty good. You're probably doing pretty well when it comes to cardiovascular risk, at least on the surface stuff that I can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for people out there, let's say somebody that has had, a heart attack, they've had, they had some significant blockages. They've had some stents put in. Overall, their body weight isn't an issue. Their cardiovascular health, they work out a lot, they run a lot. But they had these issues, and now, they've been put on a vegetarian diet. What is your thoughts on that? If they should, number one, get off statins, they've been loaded up with statins and blood thinners. And then on top of that, they've been told to take a vegetarian diet. What's your thoughts of that approach, I guess, is my question.
Yeah. So I think that, it's better than being on a standard junk food diet. And I don't know if they've been on that before. I think what I would look at, the problem with the vegetarian diet, as you might surmise, is that, there's going to be some negatives with regard to, maintaining lean mass. It's harder. It's not, you can't do it, but it's a lot harder. A lot of people end up with gut issues. Particularly if it's a really high carb, it might impact your overall glycemic control or how well your blood glucose is regulated. And those things, irrespective of cholesterol levels, are still driving cardiovascular disease. And so you've got to look at it from all the variables. If we say we're going to put you on a vegetarian diet so we can lower your cholesterol, you're going, what about my blood glucose? What about my inflammation? What about my hypertension? What about all these other things, which may or may not be impacted either good or bad on the vegetarian diet? So you've got to sort of treat it from a holistic picture. I have patients that do mat set description, that have had heart disease, that have stents in, that have had extensive, and they go on a carnivore diet. And most of them actually still do pretty well. And in fact, sometimes they do better. Sometimes they see a return of cardiac function if they've lost some, what we call, some of the metrics that we use to measure cardiac output, So I think that it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction that doesn't, it's kind of like doing the minimum work, to say, well, it's like taking a statin. It's like, well, vegetarian diet is the dietary equivalent of taking a statin in many ways. It's like, we're just going to try to lower your cholesterol because that's the one risk factor we care about. When the reality is you should be caring about all of these things. And so it's, it's sleep, it's activity level, it's exercise, it's, light exposure, it's, all this stress related, a lot, believe it or not, heart disease, there's a lot of stuff. I think something like 30% of the etiology of heart disease is actually related to stress. And, if you got people that are just always stressed out, either due to being in pain or life circumstances or whatever it might be, you got to figure out a way to mitigate those things. So I think it's more than just a singular dietary discussion or a singular drug discussion. There's a whole bunch of stuff that has to go into that. I don't think that a vegetarian diet is optimal or ideal. Quite honestly, I think you can do the holistic picture better with other dietary strategies.
Now, would you recommend the carnivore diet for somebody like that?
I would not recommend it. You'd have to have a discussion,
Right.
And like I said, this is why we have Revero. We have physicians that can kind of go through all the risks and benefits of this. And I think it's contingent, if you're going to go on a carnivore diet, but you're not going to do some other things, then it may not be the best fit for you. So I think it has to be, like I said, it has to be part of a whole package.
Yeah.
Yeah, and folks, I've put the links to Revero down in the description below, so definitely go check that out. If anything, strikes your fancy where you want somebody to, you want to be able to talk to a clinician. I don't know how you guys do it, Doc, but again, we got those links below for more information. Of course,
yeah, let me just touch on that real quick, if you don't mind, Gary, because when I was practicing doing orthopedics, and I had somebody in there that I thought would benefit from changing their diet and lifestyle. I mean, literally all I could do was give them a handout and say, hey, go watch these videos, go read this book. I had no support. I didn't have a team I could send them to. I didn't have coaches. I didn't have, education. I didn't have, technology that I could monitor them. So we built all that. So we have, a team of physicians that are going to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We have health coaches that will contact people every day if necessary. We have, we're constantly getting feedback from the patients, or they're, checking wearables, checking their blood glucose, checking their weight, checking their blood pressure, sending that up to us, on a daily or weekly basis. And so our physician can look at that stuff in real time and say, okay, time to cut your blood pressure med, time to lower your diabetes meds. Goal is to get people off medication. Whereas the traditional, doctor's office is, you go in, doctor sees you for maybe 30 minutes for a new visit, and then 15 minutes every 6 months or 3 months. You can't really get much accomplished in there. So a lot of these people, when they're dealing with chronic disease, you got to really hold their hand. You got to give them a lot of support to help them to make the right decisions, to give them the education, because a lot of questions come up. What about this? What about this? I started feeling this. Is this normal? That's impossible to do in the standard practice because you just don't have access to the care. And then you might get sent to a dietitian who's going to give you the food pyramid. It's like, well, shit, that didn't help me. That's what I've been doing already. So yeah, I mean, it's changing the way we deliver healthcare, and that's going to go one of two ways. I mean, the basic allopathic model, a lot of physicians got replaced with nurse practitioners and PAs. They're going to be replaced with AI. There's a bill in the House of Representatives right now that proposes to give AI prescribing ability. That is to say, a computer gets the right to write prescriptions with no physician oversight, which is absolutely like mind-bogglingly crazy in my view. Because who's going to program those computers, right? It's going to be programmed by the drug companies. I mean, this is what's going to happen. And so what it's going to do is going to cheapen healthcare in a way. It's going to take some of the middleman. It's going to take some of the cost of the nutrition of the provider out of there. And the patients are going to have easier access to drugs, which a lot of people will applaud. Hey, I don't have to sit in line and wait for the doctor. But at the same time, more people are going to be drugged, right? And is that where we really want to go? Just put everybody on drugs, because that's the answer. Because obesity is a genetic disease that you have no control over, like the gal from Stanford, or from Harvard was saying, this Tamika Stanford. Obesity is a drug, and it doesn't matter if you work out or eat well, you're going to be obese anyway, which is like, where the hell? And this is a, and you look at her conflicts of interest, she's getting money from Novo Nordisk, to sell you Ozempic. So
yeah.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of conflicts of interest in medicine, but again, I think it also goes back to, I think just a lot of these physicians, and just like we're talking about the AIs being trained by the drug companies, that's exactly what we're seeing with the physicians. Like talking to my cardiologist up at the VA, I could, we ended up having like a 10-15 minute discussion about, emerging information, and like he didn't know any of it. Like he like they don't know anything about nutrition. He was, he's clearly overweight. He's probably on 4 statin drugs as it is, and blood thinners and all the other things. But the fact is that, there's really not a difference in my mind between the physicians that we generally have now and whatever AI is going to be programmed, because they're going to be speaking the exact language.
You're right. I mean, it's all algorithm based. And the problem is, the physicians have outsourced the critical thinking to the drug companies. They let them just tell them what to do, and they just follow. And if you don't do it, and you don't follow the guidelines, if you're working for the VA, if you're working for Kaiser Permanente, and you don't have enough of your check boxes in the right areas, they're going to start saying they're going to dock you pay, or start saying, hey, you're probably not appropriate for our corporation. And these corporations are buying everything up. I mean, all these small independent practices are being gobbled up by these giant corporations, and that's kind of unfortunate, because I think a lot of people are going to just be, just, I don't know, kind of sheep like, get their shots.
Well, by the same token, I mean, I had a discussion with our local family physician a couple of years ago when I went in for an appointment. And he's a local guy. He has his own practice. He's just trying to survive. And he knew we were a business owner as well. And he's like, look, I got to be honest with you. You came in for this one thing. He's like, the insurance company says I'll get the full payment if I discuss 3 items with you. So basically, what else can we discuss during this visit so that I can actually make some money to support my practice? And that's the position. That's the position that, some of these smaller practices have been put in as well, where, they're tied to insurance companies, drug companies, just to be able to survive and keep their practice going.
Yeah, I mean, it's the incentives are perverse, quite honestly. I mean, it's just like, you go in there and you're like, oh, the doctor's really thorough. He asked me all these questions. It's only because he's trying to get paid. I mean, he's got to ask these questions. You got to ask, how many review of systems questions, how many chief complaints, how many symptoms, you got to fill in all these blanks. So then you can code it the correct way, so you can upcode it, so you can get paid a little more money. And the practices know that, and they kind of optimize for that. And it's really, I mean, it's kind of lost the actual purpose of going to the doctor. It's the doctor's there is like, I know I need to fill in these things, irrespective if it's actually useful or not. It's like, we got to ask you these stupid questions that may or may not even have anything to do with what you're really here for.
Yeah, like I said, he was upfront and honest about it, and he actually gives a vibe of, I actually care and I want to help, but I also need to survive as a physician in a practice.
No, I get it. I get it. It's tough. I mean, it's, I don't want to say physicians are have it any worse than anybody else, but I mean, it's unfortunately, medicine over the years, if you talk to most physicians that have been in it for 20, 30, 40 years, they'll all say it's gotten way worse. It's just, it's just really, demoralizing to go. And you see what and this is another topic, but I mean, the new medical students are all being indoctrinated into this sort of nonsense, social justice stuff. And
right.
It's gone a long way from the actual art of medicine, which might've been something we could have talked about 50 years ago, and not just the business of medicine, for sure.
Speaking of social justice and culture, how much have you had to fight against the politically correct thing being, cows are bad for the environment and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, quite a bit. I mean, obviously, I'm the guy out there saying eat more beef, and then everybody's saying, oh my God, cow farts are boiling in the ocean, and so I've had to educate myself on that. And so I know a hell of a lot more about cattle ranching than the average physician. But, there's some physicians that actually raise cattle, they know more than me. But I mean, I have, gotten out there and have, fought that fight over and over again. And I think the problem is, and again, a lot of people are waking up to this. My friend Saifuddin Amos, who's a big Bitcoin guy, says, cow farts are boiling the oceans, which I think is kind of a funny, image. But yeah, I mean, that's something that, and this is really what was being, because what we're seeing is, there's sort of three tenets on why you shouldn't eat meat. One, it kills you, gives you heart disease and cancer. Total BS. That's easy to debunk. You put people on a carnivore diet and their health dramatically improves. So that's an easy one to debunk, quite honestly, because we know that nutrition science is just not very strong science. It's just, you can't do much with humans where you can actually follow them for their entire life and put them in a metabolic ward and control every variable. It's just not ethical to do. It's not financially viable to do. So we're just kind of speculating, particularly when it comes to long-term health. So the next pillar is going to be the ethics. The vegans are saying, "Oh, my plate is guiltless. Look, there's no death on my plate, and look at you, you animal abuser, you rapist." All the nonsense they spew, and they're like, "We spray, something like 5 billion tons of pesticide a year on our crops, and we kill something like 5 trillion birds and insects every year to raise crops. What about those guys? Well, they don't count." Well, what do you mean they don't count? Well, so you get into this discussion, and then they quickly lose that battle. So the only thing they have left is climate change. The world's going to explode. Look at all the tornadoes and hurricanes and fires, and it's all the cows' faults. And so I think that's something that, again, a lot of people are saying, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. I mean, guys like Elon Musk saying it's not cows. The cows have no impact. In fact, when we start looking at, cattle production, even in a feedlot situation, when you look at the nutrition that's provided, quality protein, indispensable amino acids versus the environmental impacts, the water usage, the greenhouse gas emissions, it becomes really low. Like if you just talk about calories, and this is what a lot of people like to do, they like calories versus water usage. And they'll say, well, look at the beef. The beef is way higher than whatever, a strawberry or something like that. But then you start saying, what about not just calories? Because one of the most economical crops to raise when it comes to environmental impact is sugar. So you could say, well, I could just feed everybody sugar. We get a lot of calories that way, but everybody would be sick as a dog. Like we already are. We already have a lot of sugar in there. So when you start saying, okay, well, let's talk about actual nutrition. Let's talk about things that are indispensable, things you're going to die if you don't get. And it's not just calories. And then all of a sudden beef starts looking like this. Instead of goes from here, it starts dropping really low. And, and then you start talking about what about how much carbon is sequestered in the ground, because cattle, it's like the thought that they drink all this water. 97% of it is rainwater. The rain falls regardless of the cows there or not. So it's not like the cows are out there doing rain dances. I mean, the rain is just going to fall, right? And they eat the grass, and the grass absorbs the water, and that's where they get most of their water from. And they pee. I mean, it's not like the water doesn't disappear. They pee on the ground, and it gets sucked back into the ground and goes back in the water cycle.
Yeah.
So there's so many kind of stupid arguments they make, and they shift the goalposts that suits their argument. And I think people are waking up to this. And it's kind of like I've had to learn a lot about cattle ranching and environmental impacts and greenhouse gases, and there's all these things that there's something called a GWP asterisk where they had global warming potential, and I was talking about 100 years versus 20 years versus this asterisk. And the more that you look at it, the less impactful cows have become. And it's not like we don't need to eat. We still have to eat as human beings. You can't just say make it zero, and we all starve to death. So there has to be some impact.
Well, I think one of the most profound things I ever heard you say that completely changed the way that I look at beef in general is you talked about beef being a superfood. It really is. I mean, again, you went through and kind of enumerated all the different minerals, the calcium, obviously protein, all the things that you get from beef. And it really is the superfood out there. And nobody talks about that. And I think that, as simple as that is, that little phrase to me was extremely profound.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just further on the environment part, and I'll talk about that. So it's been, it's been calculated. We know what the greenhouse gas input or, output is for cattle in the U.S. It's around 2% of our total amount. If every American went vegan and they killed all the cows and all the chickens and all the pigs and all the horses and even the cats and dogs, the worldwide impact on greenhouse gas would be like 0.3%. I mean, next to nothing. And it would be made up for, we would probably increase that from other usages. So it makes no sense for anyone to go vegan, to save the world or the planet. Now, as far as, let's talk about like, why do you eat? Why do I eat? What do I care? What do I need to eat? Well, we need to eat because we need essential amino acids. We need essential fats. We need vitamins and minerals. We need energy and water. That's the only reason humans are required to eat. Now, we eat for pleasure. We eat for taste. We eat because we're bored. We eat because of emotions. We eat because, the guy on the TV told us to eat. And, there's all these other reasons that we eat. But the reason we actually have to eat is this. And beef and other animal products, to be honest, I mean, provides basically all of that. Now, you can say, well, there's not much vitamin C, or there's a little less selenium or manganese or something like that. But the reality is, all of these RDAs, the recommended daily allowances, were determined based on populations eating 60% carbohydrates and grains, making up all their diet. And so when you change from that and you have a different background diet, those RDAs change as well. And we see this all the time. So lab values might be different. Our amounts may be different. We're not seeing sick people. In fact, we're seeing people get healthier and healthier. So we have to have a discussion around what is actually, like, if I were to say, these are the values that are important for, parrots. And I said, well, that applies to humans. You say, wait, well, parrots aren't humans. Maybe there's some differences there. The same argument can be made that this is a different metabolic state. Vitamin C is the one that always comes up. Vitamin C, which is, a required required vitamin, we get a little bit in meat. I mean, there's some in meat, believe it or not. But the need goes down quite a bit because, one, vitamin C competes with glucose. I mean, they look very similar. They're almost identical from a molecule standpoint, and they share the same transporter. And so when glucose is really high, vitamin C can't get through because the glucose is taking up all the room. So when the glucose is lower, vitamin C gets through. So you get more of it. Vitamin C is an antioxidant. But when you're on a low carb condition, your natural antioxidants go up. So you need less of an antioxidant. Vitamin C is involved in carnitine metabolism. Carnitine you get from meat. And so it's like all these things that mitigate that. And so we have to say, okay, well, what's the situation here? So it's again, it's very nuanced, like the cholesterol, issue is.
Talking about the environmentalists and stuff, I mean, you are a content creating genius that you like monetized lunch and dinner. And I love when I see you're just playing these videos, these shorts with, some weirdo in the background talking
Most
about.
believe that red meat rots in your colon, causes cancer, diabetes, heart disease, chronic inflammation, hypertension, gout, kidney stones, stroke.
I love that. And as you're sitting there playing this and they're talking about the environment
with the same shirt.
Yeah, I'm wearing the same shirt today. It's funny. Yeah, it's kind of wear this one every once in a while.
I like that shirt.
This is my jujitsu coach, Greg Anderson. Courage is contagious, which I think is a nice saying. But there is, I mean, it was kind of like, I saw this, like, I remember the first time I did this, I saw some vegan was preparing some meal, and it was like exhausting watching them they were making some kind of like fake steak, and I was like, shit, I'll throw mine on a grill 5 minutes and I'm done, And I was just like, so I was just like, I'm just going to eat a steak and listen to this wacko talk about 75 steps to make a fake steak. And I was like, so that just kind of went over well. So we just kind of do that. So there's a bunch of videos. I just took a bunch of videos of me eating, I'm eating it. And so we just slap in these humorous wacko takes of these crazy people and their nonsense and just kind of contrast that to the simplicity, because I don't think nutrition should be that complicated. I mean, it shouldn't be. You shouldn't have to sit there and, just have anxiety, but what am I supposed to eat today? And how many balance my macros? And I got to get this and that. And I mean, no other animal on the planet does that. There's no like, lions and cows out there going, oh my God, let me check my monitor, my Fitbit, my Oura ring. I got to consult my dietitian to know what the hell to eat. And I just don't think humans need that either. And so anyway, it's interesting, when we compare different species, like, of all the animals that have ever existed on planet Earth, whether they're flying in the air, swimming in the water, crawling on the ground, the vast majority, like something like 75% of them, have been carnivorous. Why is that? Because it's just simpler nutrition. I mean, I'm composed of a bunch of animal cells. We all are, right? And where do we get the materials to build animal cells? Where do you think a good place to get that would be from? Other animal cells, right? I mean, so it's like this fake brick wall behind me. If I wanted to build a house out of bricks, a brick house, it'd be really nice if I had a bunch of bricks, right? Mm-hmm. If I had straw and mud, I could turn it. And that's what plant material has done. We have to change it, manipulate, and we have some capacity to do that. Like I said, we're omnivores, but it's way more efficient doing it carnivorous. In fact, it's interesting. If you look at comparative gut anatomy, like the amount of space in our gut that is dedicated to fermentating plant material is about 16%. That's the same as a cat or a dog, right? And what do cats and dogs eat? Well, they primarily eat a bunch of meat, right? I mean, it's kind of like cats can actually, because people say, well, humans have the capacity to break down starch and we have amylase. Well, so do cats. Cats actually can eat starch and grains. They're not designed for it. That's not optimal for them. But so anyway, it's one of those interesting, kind of quirks in anatomy. Like you compare more comparative anatomy. You compare our gut to another primate, a chimpanzee or a gorilla. We can get approximately something like 4%, is maybe as high as 10% of our calories can come from fermented fibers. Gorilla is like 70%. Chimpanzees like 55%. So we have this tiny little capacity, and it's kind of like a fallback. It's like, yeah, we can, thankfully, when the meat's not there, we can eat a few plants and still get by. But I mean, I would argue that there was a period of time where there was a lot of meat, big elephants, big mammoths. There weren't many of us. We were pretty good at killing them. You go down and knock down an elephant, your little tribe of 20 people is eating for the next 2 or 3 months. You got 6 million calories there. And so that was what we did for a long time until there was a period of time where human populations expanded, the mega herbivores started to decline. Then now we got to chase little animals. We got to chase these antelopes around. They're fast. They don't sit there. And they run away. So now about 80,000 years ago, we developed bow and arrows and atlatls and all these things so we can hit stuff with range. So we've had this kind of interesting, there's a really nice paper by a guy named Mickey Bendor, Rafi Sartoli, and Raina Barca. It came out a couple of years ago out of Tel Aviv. And they it's called the human trophic level. And it talks about up until about 80,000 years ago, human beings were primarily carnivorous. And then like I said, we overate our food supply. Obviously there was some climactic. I mean, a lot of people like to talk about this 12,000 years ago, younger Dryas, which, that wiped out a lot of the North American megafauna. But you can look back in history and everywhere humans went 65,000 years ago when they got to Australia, megafauna wiped out, all the big birds, it's killed. We just kind of, everywhere we go, we just eat all the big stuff, eat all the good stuff. We used to eat all these tortoises. I mean, I was in the Galapagos Islands back in November. These big, 400 or 500 pound tortoises walking around. They had tortoises that weighed over 1,000 pounds for much of humanity. And we just ate them all because tortoises don't run away and they just kind of suck into their shell. Well, guess what? If you're a human, you can knock that thing over and get a big pointed rock, you can crack them open. And that's what we did. So we had all this turtle meat that we ate all these tortoises for 100,000 years until we basically made a bunch of them go extinct.
I mean, it just makes sense. I mean, if you think about until we had, mass agriculture, just the energy expenditure going around looking for berries, looking for vegetables that, are just so intermittent. Of course, it just makes more sense. Hey, there's a freaking deer over there. There's a mammoth over there. We can go kill that thing and we're going to have food for days, weeks, months.
I mean, go watch the TV show alone.
Yeah.
That series alone will prove. I mean,
if you get a moose, moose in that show, you won. I mean, it's done. I mean, it's in, and then you see all these people. Like the one thing that always cracks me up, those people that come in and they fatten themselves up. I'm gonna swell up to 300 pounds because I know I'm gonna starve and I just live on my own body fat for a while. But I mean, it's clear that meat is the primary fuel. Now, again, the argument is, what about, should you eat plants? And that's one of those things where I would say, if you tolerate them, fine. But, what does it mean to tolerate it? If you're walking around with a bloated gut, like a lot of women, they're always eating all these salads. And I asked them, well, how's your gut? Well, I always got this bloated lower belly. That ain't normal. That's not supposed to be happening. You think about it. If I walked around and I would have chest pain, you'd say, I need to go to the doctor. There's something wrong with me. Or if I've got knee pain, I'm gonna go to the doctor, get it checked. Or if I've got, if I've got breathing pain or headaches, you're going to go to the doctor. Something's wrong. But when our gut is hurting, it's just normal digestion, a little gassy. That is not normal, right? If your gut hurts, either you're eating the wrong damn food or there's something wrong with your gut. I mean, that's the scenario. Now, when the thing that really blew me away, when I first went carnivore, and I was already on a low carb diet doing pretty good, I would eat, I would just eat a bunch of steak. And then I was like, an hour later, did I eat anything? Because I didn't notice I was digesting anything. There was literally nothing. It was like driving in a brand new luxury car. There's no noise. It was just like, this is weird. So, I mean, I think that's how we're designed. We're designed for our functions to work well without discomfort or pain. And if you try to convince me that it's normal to be uncomfortable, have indigestion, bloating, gas, I'm going to say you're kind of full of it. You are. You're full of it. You're full of crap.
Yeah.
No, I did carnivore for like 2 months, and I'm getting ready to go back on it, which is one of the reasons I want to have you on. But I did carnivore for like 2 months, and one of the things I noticed, like, you don't poop very much. Like,
Yeah, you're absorbing everything.
when you do, it's like bloop, bloop, and you freaking
Thanks for the information.
you're good to go. But I mean, it's it's clear that you're digesting everything, and that's the point. Is like you're not. And I noticed this too. I used to travel a lot. I used to work overseas a lot, and when I was in Africa, especially, you'd buy food from restaurants there, and like that chicken or that whatever you're eating there was literally alive like 3 hours ago.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
that was one of the things. I actually felt better over there. You could tell that everything wasn't full of pesticides, wasn't GMO, wasn't all those things. So you start shoving into your body foods that you probably weren't meant to eat to begin with, and then on top of that, we're throwing in genetically modified foods that screw your guts up and everything else, on top of the different pesticides, the herbicides that are on these things. And it really does cause some problems. And I think, it's to me, the results were profound. But
the other thing I've noticed is a lot of times, and this is personal experience as well as talking to other people, is you don't realize how bad you feel until you feel clean, but then you mess up again and you feel horrible, and you're like, oh, I didn't realize how bad this felt. I mean, like we had previously done bodybuilding competitions, for example, and just eating super clean for months at a time, no sugars, no processed foods, nothing like that. And then immediately after a show, you want to go get ice cream, right? And then you eat it and you just like, wow, I didn't realize how bad this felt until I had that time of not feeling that at all.
Well, even like muscle pains, joint pains, all the stuff in it, I don't feel that a lot, but there's some there, but like all of that went away, and I slept so much better when I was on carnivore. But I was like, oh, this is too healthy. I guess I'll stop doing this.
Well, it's kind of like because it's like the crab being slowly boiled. I mean, they don't notice it, and so as we get older, and we're just kind of used to discomfort, and then all of a sudden it stops, and then you're like, wow, that was actually not too good. And so what happens is, I think, because we have this, this hormetic effect where we build up our defenses, we kind of poison ourselves a little bit, and our body says, wait a minute, we need to slow this thing down. Let's upregulate some enzymes. And so you gain some capacity, but when you're not exposed to that, your body says, well, I don't need those enzymes anymore. We're not going to produce them. It's a waste of money.
Right.
So you kind of lower your defenses a little bit. So then you slug a bunch of sugar, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I feel like I've been beat up. I'm hung over the next day. It's like literally you have like a sugar hangover.
100%.
And you just,
Really.
So it's like, but it's like, do I need to have all these defenses up all the time? Because it's expensive. I mean, it's like, it's kind of like, we talk about efficiency. Do I want to have some of my energy going towards enzymatic reactions to detoxify poisons? Because I mean, there is a cost to that. And the question is, would it be better if I just didn't poison myself? It's like if you go to the doctor and you're whacking yourself over the head with a hammer every day, and you go there, hey doc, I got a headache. And the doctor says, well, here's some aspirin, take some aspirin. And, he doesn't ask you what you're doing. And then the other guy goes, well, can I, just keep whacking myself over the head? And the other one would say, well, why don't you just stop hitting yourself in the head with a hammer? That might be a start, but we just kind of ignore that. We're just like, well, just give me the pill. And so, like, stop poisoning yourself. I mean, I think, I know that's strong terminology, but I literally think some of this ultra processed garbage is literally like poisoning ourselves, albeit it's slow, and it's, it's like a lot of the food supply, like I said, it's, generally recognized as safe. I mean, it doesn't kill you right away. It doesn't kill the rat right away. But what happens if you eat it over a period of 10 years? Why did I get that autoimmune disease? Why am I demented? Why do I have diabetes? Why did my thyroid fail? Right. So there are these types of things that we just don't have any idea. And we're, we have this massive experiment on the population, and, you can look around and see how it's going. It's not going very well.
No, we got the sickest population. We have the best healthcare, more drugs being prescribed every single day, but we have the sickest population on the face of the earth that we've ever had. Let's talk a little bit about statins, if you will, docs. Just, you know, the last study that I looked at indicated that statins have no positive effect on overall mortality in general. And if you will, talk a little bit about that, as well as the possible negative side effects. And maybe you have some additional studies that have come out. I don't know.
Well, I mean, there are literally thousands of studies on statins. Most of them are drug company sponsored. So you have to take all of those with a grain of salt, because they don't even release all their data. It's kind of interesting. All these drug companies that put these studies out that are quote unquote peer reviewed, the peer reviewers never get to see the actual data. They get to see the investigators' summary of the data, and they tell them what they think. Well, let's see your raw data. No, we don't have to share that because it's proprietary. So we've got that, first of all, as a bias in there. Now, statin usage, you know, certainly they'll say that in the general population for primary prevention, that's someone who's never had a heart attack, the results are pretty modest. You know, some people say it extends someone's life by like 3 or 4 days. It's like, you know, is it worth it? And for a significant percentage of the people are going to have so many side effects, you know, well-documented side effects are things like myalgias, muscle pains, you know, difficulties there. There's clearly a relationship between statin usage and insulin resistance. So if you go on a statin, you become more insulin resistant, and insulin resistance is sort of the underlying pathology in diabetes, and diabetes clearly makes heart disease worse. So it's kind of like, maybe you're making it worse. There's some concerns around perhaps dementia. I mean, there's studies out there. There was a study, they did this interesting pilot where they took these demented patients that were, you know, clearly cognitively impaired, but they were on statins, and they took them off the statins and their brain turned back on. And I was like, okay. So then they put them back on the statin and they went back to being goofy again. So it's like, that's a pretty clear, you know, issue, right? Yeah. It's like, you know, but they decided not to continue to do that study. It's like, well, we don't want to know. We don't want to open that.
We don't want to actually know what
we don't want to do that. So I think that, you know, where might lipid lowering therapy have the best use scenario? It's probably in the patient that's had a heart attack, that is clearly metabolically compromised, that is unwilling or unable to fix the metabolic issues. Then it's like, okay, we should perhaps lower the cholesterol, because these people are pretty frail and pretty good at risk. Now, the current sort of people that are in cardiology and lipidology are saying, you know, because it's been, you know, it used to be cholesterol 300 was fine, then it was 240, then they lowered it to 200, then they lowered it to 190, and they keep doubling down because it doesn't make a difference. You know, the average person's cholesterol in the United States over the last 50 years has dropped 20 points, which is huge. I mean, that's a huge difference. And yet the incidence of cardiovascular disease is about the same. It hasn't really improved much. Now, some of that smoking rates have come down. And people live longer with cardiovascular disease because we have these interventions. You put stents in and bypasses and all these other, you know, medications. But it really hasn't, you know, by lowering cholesterol, really hasn't changed the incidence of cardiovascular disease. And you're absolutely right. You know, we've got all these drugs for diabetes and heart disease and hypertension. Despite having all these drugs, there's not any less people having these diseases. They're just medicated. So, and that's the whole point. You know, the recurring model. It's like, we don't want to cure the disease. Well, that would be bad for business. You know, like Goldman Sachs did an evaluation a few years back and said, does it make sense to cure a disease? And they came back and said, nope, doesn't make sense from a financial standpoint to cure disease. And so they don't try to cure disease. The other thing about statins, I think, is that, yeah, so the newest push is, you know, 300, then 240, then 200, then 190. Now it's like, we got to get down even lower. Let's do statins and PCSK9 inhibitors and bempedoic acid and all these drugs. We want your cholesterol to be like it was when you were an infant, like when you were a newborn baby. You know, LDL cholesterol in a newborn baby is like 40 milligrams per deciliter. Normal human, 150 to 100 to 200 typically is the normal range. And then I'm like, well, because, you know, newborn babies don't have heart disease, you know, but what happens when a baby is breastfed? When a baby is breastfed, within about 3 months, their cholesterol goes to 200. Yeah. And you're like, are you telling me that breastfeeding a baby is giving it heart disease? I mean, and you're like, so, you know, where does this nonsense come from? You're supposing a human being that's never eaten before, just got born, hasn't eaten a meal yet. That's our ideal cholesterol. And I'm like, don't we have to eat? You know, it's kind of like insane. Now, yeah, I mean, it's like, so here's the answer. Let's say I was scared of getting a sexually transmitted disease. I don't want chlamydia. I don't want gonorrhea, right? So the doc says, well, you know, we can just cut your penis off. It's problem solved. right? That's kind of what this is doing. It's like, well, yeah, but there's kind of some negatives to that, right? So, I mean, this is how we're doing this cholesterol. Get it down to zero. Then nobody will have a heart attack. Yeah, but their brain may stop working or something. You know, it's just, it's kind of insanity what we've gotten into. These people are so myopically focused on this one concept that they're just like, well, it didn't work. Keep going. Keep double down on stupidity. And that's what we're seeing right now. It would, you know, try harder, you know, keep going harder, harder, harder. Yeah. So I'm not, like I said, I'm not here to tell, you know, medical advice, don't take a statin, but I mean, educate yourself, please. You know, there's a lot of nuance around this stuff. And, you know, like I said, if you're unwilling to do the lifestyle stuff, right? If you're unwilling to, you know, get in shape, lose weight, not be diabetic, then yeah, maybe you need to take the drugs, you know, but I think there's a better option, quite honestly.
I think you may have just inspired big pharma to start recommending statins to, you know, infants, breastfeeding infants.
Well, they are starting with little kids. They actually are. There are little kids they're recommending statins on it, like, you know, 12 years of age, 6 years of age in some cases. So yeah, that's already happened.
Let's not fix the lifestyle of those kids. That's going to set them up for quickly going into
I mean, and we don't know. I mean, God, what do you know, cholesterol is important. I mean, it's an important molecule. I mean, it participates in the immune system. It participates in our hormone production, participates in brain function. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's just a crazy time we live in.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all these statin drugs, but I mean, the last time I looked at the data too, it doesn't look like we have 10, I don't know what the percentage from like 1990 to now, what percentage of people or the percentage of increase of statin drugs have taken place, but we still have people at the same rate dying of heart disease. So it clearly doesn't have the greatest effect. And of course, you talked about some of the negative effects. So what are some of the people out there that probably, and folks, we're going to get to your questions here in just a moment, but what are the people that you wouldn't recommend a carnivore diet to?
You know, like I said, I think it's important to realize who really benefits from it. I think sick people. You know, sick people are what I do. You know, if you're already healthy, you're happy with what you're eating, you're lean, you're physically fit, you don't have any disease, there's no reason to do it. And again, I think that most people don't need to do this diet. Now, you know, if you don't like meat, yeah, it's going to be hard to do. If you live in a country where you can't afford meat or it's not available, you live in, you know, kind of northern India where you get shot for eating cows. I mean, that's probably not the best place to do this. Although you could probably eat goat and lamb, I suppose. But you know, I think that, you know, whether you go carnivore or not, I think all people would do better if they would increase their consumption of high quality protein and just cut back on junk. I mean, I think that intervention alone would save a lot of people. Now, some people, you know, I think, you know, you know, there's a lot of controversy around athletics and, you know, is it ideal for, you know, do you need a bunch of carbs to perform well? And I think that discussion is starting to change a little bit. But again, I think if you're not sick and you're happy where you are, there's no reason to change. I mean, like I said, at the end of the day, I'm not religious about this. I could care less. I mean, most people that do carnivore will do it for a period of time, 3 months, 6 months, a year, and then they'll start adding a few things back in, which is totally fine in my opinion. As long as you do well with that, as long as it's optimal for you. I think that men adopt it a little bit more easily than women. You know, guys like steak. I mean, there's certainly women that do, but I mean, there's a lot of women that have been kind of brainwashed and they're scared of fat and they've been told to eat, you know, salad with its little thin piece of chicken with dressing on the side. And that's kind of their bias. And sometimes they've gotten to where, oh, I'm scared of fat, and they cut all the fat off their steak. And, you know, it's just like one of those things where you have to sort of slowly, like my wife was like that. My wife was a vegetarian was just finishing vegetarianism when I met her. And it took me 5 years to get her to eat a hamburger. And now she eats steak every night and she loves it, you know, but the only problem with her, she likes it well done, which drives me crazy a little bit, but
she'll change. But I used to like mine well done, and now I like it medium rare. So
well, I don't know. She's holding on. So she's still hanging on. She still thinks it's blood. She has this belief that a juicy steak is blood. And it's not, it's myoglobin.
No,
it's not blood.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
There's something I was going to say. Oh, what is your thoughts on, you know, there's differing degrees of carnivore, obviously. You know, there's all beef, all meat. Some people are adding dairy, some are adding milk, some are adding eggs. Like, kind of what's your thought on where all that lies?
Yeah. So I think, again, just like I said, not everybody needs to be on a carnivore diet. Not everybody needs to be on a strict beef only diet. I mean, that is probably something that's best reserved for somebody that has got a lot of gut issues, a lot of, autoimmune issues. And that's where we find that eliminating damn near everything. Because some people, eggs give them trouble. Some people, dairy gives them trouble. Some people, pork gives them trouble. So I find that beef or lamb, those two are pretty kind of equivalent, tend to be tolerated the best. And so there's people that have so many issues, you really got to dial it back down. The other variable that's quite important that I've come to discover over the years of treating, thousands of patients is the fat content. Some people need to do this in a very ketogenic style where they're eating mostly fat. And the reason that I see people having benefit with that are people that have primarily central nervous system issues. So that would be things like multiple sclerosis or dementia, Parkinson's disease, ALS, perhaps depression, anxiety, those types of things really respond better with that sort of more ketogenic state. Now, like your average person that wants to lose weight, or maybe he's a little diabetic, they can get away with a higher protein to fat ratio. So there's some different ways to tailor this. And again, as far as I tell people if they just want to try it and they don't have any like super, sensitivities, maybe they just want to lose some weight, start with a variety. Start with, if it had a face, parents, you can eat it, right? Pork, lamb, bacon, eggs, chicken, turkey, seafood, shellfish, shrimp, clams, beef, and see where you go. And you maybe put a little seasoning on there, and then you just kind of say, okay, this helped, but can I improve things? And it's usually, because we're kind of trained that we just got to keep adding supplements. Well, I need to supplement this and supplement. It's really more often the time you just got to take stuff out, take out the irritants. And because I believe, and this is like, what was his name? Stefansson back in the 1920s when he went and lived with the Inuits for, it was actually 1908 or something like that. He lived among the Inuit for like 12 years. Didn't eat any vegetables. And just ate meat for 12 years. And he came back to New York and they said, no, we don't believe you. So he said, well, I'll do it for a year. I'll test it. And they stuck him in Bellevue Hospital for about a month, watched every meal, and they signed a guy to follow him everywhere he went for a year to watch him eat. And it came back and he was like totally healthy, totally fine. So it's one of those things that I think you should enjoy it, because any diet that you don't enjoy, also any diet that you're hungry on all the time, you're just not gonna be able to stick to it. It's not sustainable. So you've got to, number one, enjoy what you're eating, and number two, not be hungry all the time, because that is clearly.
The approach is, if it had a face, you can eat it, may make the transition more easier for most of the population as well, where you have more of a variety of things to choose from than just beef.
Yeah, there are literally thousands of ways you can cook and prepare. If you're like a foodie person and likes, there's all these recipes like carnivore breads and crispy things and crunchy things that people miss texturally. There's recipes out. There's people that are really creative and they'll just use like eggs and cheese and pork rinds and all these things to make these crazy products. I'm lazy. Just give me a damn steak and I'm good. I'm just, it's just like, it's like, I don't like spending a lot of time doing it. Occasionally I will, like I cook for my kids. I'll throw them to do something, goofy or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you should enjoy it. And like I said, I tell people if you're going to do it for 3 months. I think that is a fair assessment, particularly if you're dealing with some health condition. Do it for 3 months. You'll get some indication if it's going to be helpful or not. If it doesn't help you at all, then you'll do something else. Or maybe find somebody that maybe you can tweak it a little bit. But generally, if you do it for like a week, you're not even transitioned. You're gonna need probably a month just to transition into the physiology. So if you're not willing to do it that long, and for most people, the reason I say 3 months is back a few years ago, I surveyed 12,000 people doing this diet, and I asked them, when did you notice significant improvement in XYZ conditions? By 3 months, the vast majority of people had noted significant improvements, whether they're dealing with psoriasis going away or joint pain or, mental health issues. So 3 months seems to be a pretty big inflection point.
Gotcha.
Now, for people that are, I don't know, that fail on or get off the carnivore diet and they don't feel like they can sustain it, what do you think's like some of the key things that cause them to not be successful on the diet?
Probably the biggest thing is under eating. That's probably the biggest thing we run into, because beef is very satiating, and it's very satiety provoking. So satiation means you felt full after your meal. Satiety means you weren't hungry for a long period of time. So if you go and just like I'm going to start the carnivore diet tomorrow, I'm going to eat a 16-ounce ribeye and 6 eggs for breakfast. I didn't want lunch, and dinner I was not that hungry. And then you do that over a period of time, and maybe you're just under eating. because you're just not hungry. And then when you're under eating, what happens? You get cold, your thyroid starts slowing down, your hair starts falling out, you don't have energy, you start having cravings all the time. So a lot of times I got to encourage people just to eat more. It's like, they're like, well, I started this diet and I ran out of energy. I said, well, how much weight did you lose? Well, I lost 50 pounds. Well, you probably didn't eat enough. I mean, it's great you're losing weight, but you probably need a little more energy in your diet so that you can do that. So yeah, there's a comment in here from somebody saying they started, lost 40 pounds, lightheaded, shaky, feeble, and diarrhea. Yeah, those are some things that, fat absorption, eating enough, figuring out how to get the fat in there, because, when you're relying on not carbohydrates, you got to get your energy from fat. You can burn your own fat to some degree, but as you get leaner and leaner, that becomes less of an option. And so it's a matter of, if you're having diarrhea, that's probably fat that's not absorbing. And so when your fat is not being absorbed, guess what? You're low in energy. All right. So you have to figure out, limit the rendered fats. That's why, it's preferable to eat fat that's attached to meat, because it's still bound in a matrix and it takes a longer time to break down. And it kind of gets, our stomach will spend about 3 hours breaking down a piece of steak. And then it turns it little by little into liquid, and that liquid kind of slowly gets into the small intestine and it gets absorbed. But when you eat a bunch of rendered fat, like grease or butter,
what about beef tallow?
Yeah, beef tallow, same thing. All that stuff will then get dumped into the small intestine at a much higher frequency or much higher volume, and then it may overwhelm you. So I tell people, just be cautious around rendered fat. It's not that you can't have it, but if you're eating too much of it, and particularly if you're eating diarrhea, it's a waste of money. I don't like to waste money. It's like when you go into the store and buy all these organic fruits and vegetables, not only do half of them get rotten and you throw them out, but the other thing is most of it doesn't get digested. So all you do is you just poop more. It's just like all that nutrition is going down the toilet. In fact, they've done studies on people on high fiber diets, and they found that the amount of protein, fat, and carbohydrate that ends up in the toilet that you don't digest actually doubles, right? So it's like, I'm paying all this money for these expensive foods and I'm just crapping it all out. I might as well just flush dollar bills down the toilet, right? So with meat, as you mentioned, you poop less. It's because you're absorbing the actual nutrition, which is far, far more efficient.
Which the medical industry points toward a high fiber diet as being one of the solutions toward heart health as well, and gut health for that matter.
Yeah. So, with regard to gut health, it's believed that fiber is important for certain bacteria in our microbiome, right? These are the bacteria that populate our gut, primarily our colon. And that there's some truth to that these fiber will produce something called short chain fatty acids, probably primarily things like butyrate or butyric acid. But the interesting thing is, when you go low carb, you often will develop ketone bodies, which are a thing called beta hydroxybutyrate, which is very similar sounding to butyric acid because it's very similar. It's like a OH molecule away, and they can change back and forth very easily. We also know that there's a really nice paper that a guy named Tommy Wood and Lucy Mailing did out of University of Washington. There's another guy, I think, out of UCLA, and they looked at the metabolic flexibility of the gut, and they found that while, yes, it is true that fiber can have these beneficial effects, you can get the same thing on a high-fat animal-based diet, and that protein can turn into short-chain fatty acids. You can produce ketones, which, again, as I mentioned, produces the beta-hydroxybutyrate. But fiber, really the benefits of fiber are primarily conditional. That is to say, if you are eating the standard Western junk food diet, higher fiber typically indicates better overall diet quality, because that's usually like your fruits and vegetables as opposed to Oreo cookies and Doritos, right? And then the other thing is fiber prevents it does the opposite of nutrition. It prevents you from absorbing nutrients. That's why you have bigger bowel movements, right? So that nutrition is not going in your body, so you don't get as fat, right? And so that's where it's beneficial. However, the same thing happens with carnivore, except you don't get fat because your appetite is suppressed, because you're absorbing all that nutrition. So one way is to get skinny by kind of malnourishing yourself a little bit. The other way is to get skinny by nourishing yourself but suppressing your appetite. I would argue that second strategy is more beneficial, because you retain more lean mass, you feel better, better energy, you better glucose control. Then the question again, we have the cholesterol question, and that's really the big differentiator. I can lower my cholesterol by eating cardboard, for sure. There's no doubt about it. You can literally, it's interesting. I made a joke. I said, you could eat sand and get the same effect as cardboard, same effect as fiber. And actually, there is research where they've actually done that in humans. They have produced synthetic sand, these synthetic silicate particles. They fed them to human beings. And what it shows is their blood glucose improves. Their hemoglobin A1C goes down. So you could literally say, well, you just eat sand. I mean, small amounts of sand in your food or sand-like properties will have a fiber-like effect. Does that mean we're designed and we should be eating a lot of sand? Probably not.
No.
But it's it's how you measure things.
Right.
Sure. Con says, question for Dr. Baker. What supplements have you researched that will help with arthritis of the hands, wrists, and knees? I'm a machine mechanic for decades.
Well, again, this depends on the context, which it is. My advice would be to go on a diet that eliminates refined carbohydrates, sugars, gut irritants. That's going to have the biggest impact by far. Beyond that, I mean, you can look at some of these things that have come out over the years, the glucosamines, chondroitin sulfates, and they've got, kind of, questionable efficacy. Some animal studies seem to show some positive benefits. Human studies have been kind of mixed on that. I haven't really looked at, I'm not really much of a supplement guy. I'll be the first guy to tell you, I'm not a big supplement. I don't take any, I don't push any. So I don't have a really good answer on that particular one. I don't, I feel that human beings should be healthy without requiring supplements. I know it's like blasphemy to say now because everybody's selling supplements, but the soils have been depleted of nutrients and all that. And yeah, there's some of that, but I honestly think that, there's all these people talking about the supplements they're taking.
Yeah.
I get it. I think if there's a known deficiency state, you can temporarily boost that up. You can certainly manipulate your if your vitamin D status is low, if you mega dose vitamin D, it'll go up clearly. Will that actually ultimately result in a positive outcome? Maybe, depending upon what your background diet is. Maybe if you're on a standard American diet, that's beneficial. Again, we don't have enough data on the population that I'm interested in to really tell that. So honestly, I think rather than taking more supplements, eliminate poison. Would be probably the better answer.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. So, when you get your blood work done, and I'm, you clearly spend a lot of time outside doing things and activities like that. Your vitamin D level is normal. Is it normally low? Like, what does that normally look like?
You mean my personal number?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, it's not super high. I mean, it's not like, super high. It's just like above, it's above the lower thresholds. I mean, it's like 40 or something like that, again, I hate to confuse people on this and make it seem more complicated, but it's more nuanced and complicated than you think it is because, back in the 1920s, I think it was the 20s or 30s, they studied these Eskimos that were living in, I think, Labrador, up in Canada. And they had two populations, or they might've been Greenland. Anyway, they had two populations of them. Both of them had really low vitamin D levels. Serum levels were low and what they can test back then. And they looked at their clinical outcomes, and there's a condition called rickets. And so when kids don't get enough vitamin D's, their bones bend, right? So they get these bent, like bow-legged knees. And that's a you don't see it as much these days, but I saw a few times when I was doing orthopedics. But they had these two groups. They measured the vitamin D. Both of them were low. One group had rickets, one group didn't, right? So why did the group that had low vitamin D have rickets, and why did the other one that had low vitamin D not get rickets? Well, the group that had rickets, in addition to eating their caribou and their seafood and all that stuff, was eating flour and sugar and canned food, right? This is back in the 1920s. The other group wasn't eating that stuff, but even though they had low vitamin D levels, they had no evidence of clinical deficiency. So again, it's not just what the blood level is. There's more to it that goes into this stuff. So because of the blood levels, one may indicate insufficiency, one may indicate sufficiency. It's because it's the context by which these numbers are there. So I wish, unfortunately, everything's complicated. Everything's nuanced. Everything's complicated. You can't just say,
there's no blank
this and you're going to be fine. Right.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times the people with low vitamin D, it's a consequence of metabolic overall health anyway, because a lot of times, if the kidney's not working well, you have a hard time converting some of the vitamin D. Why might the kidney be problematic? Often it's diabetic or diabetic pathophysiology or insulin resistance, so on and so forth.
This gentleman, old Jeff Johnson,
high blood pressure. That's really high. Yeah, that's high stuff. Yeah, for sure.
High blood pressure.
That is.
Yeah, I mean that's you get that number and people are worried about strokes. I mean, and you do see that. And so these are numbers that I think we recently redefined hypertension on the systolic side. That's the top number, as anything over 130. It used to be 140. So I think, and again, I don't know what Jeff's situation here is, but I mean, I would look at certainly diet. I would look at sleep. When you don't sleep well, a bad night of sleep equals insulin resistance the next day. Insulin resistance means poor appetite control. Poor appetite control means crappy diet. Crappy diet makes you sleep worse. And it's, the sleep apnea. And you have this vicious cycle. So you have to break out of that. And so I think, I certainly, like I said, he might be a perfect, for Revero, this is what we do. We could take people like that. We put them with the doctor. They get them on the right diet. They provide the support. They measure the blood pressure every couple of days. And, because I assume you're on a bunch of meds, maybe not. I mean, with that, they might put you on 3 or 4 blood pressure meds. They put you on an ACE inhibitor and a beta blocker and a calcium channel blocker and diuretic and all this stuff. And then you're like, okay, now I got to take 4 pills a day. And it may come down to 170 or something like that. But whereas you can go on a diet and it'll normalize, maybe. I mean, it's worth trying.
Yep.
But you do see the carnivore diet helping people with high blood pressure as well, I guess, is your answer.
Absolutely, for sure.
Gordon Goodell says, what if you have 1 kidney and are diagnosed stage 3 kidney disease? Can the carnivore diet still work? I'm also missing 80 or 90% of my large intestine due to ulcerative colitis.
Yeah, I wish you would have discovered carnivore diet before you lost all that intestine. And that's the thing, because it works wonderful for ulcerative colitis. And if you're still suffering from that, absolutely, I'd recommend it. I don't think kidney disease is a contraindication. In fact, there are a number of studies now that show that a high protein, low carb diet actually protects kidneys and actually can restore. Like my friend David Unwin, who's a general practitioner in the UK, has done a case series on a whole bunch of patients that were diabetic that had stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 kidney disease, and they reversed it. They started to see it return with a higher protein animal-based diet. So absolutely, it's not a contraindication. Now you have to understand that when you eat a higher protein diet, your creatinine will go up.
Mm-hmm.
That is often associated with kidney disease, but in the context of a high protein diet, that may be just completely normal for protein. So there's another test called cystatin C, which is often more beneficial to get that.
I mean, we heard numerous times when we were doing like bodybuilding and all that, all that protein, you're going to kill your kidneys. You're destroying your kidneys. And
look at, I mean, Jose Antonio has got some good studies on that. He's a researcher who's done, he's a president of the American College the International Society of Sports Nutrition, ISSN. And they were feeding bodybuilders, 500-600 grams of protein a day. No evidence of kidney disease. It's just a myth.
I mean, I'm not trying to toot our own horn, but we're both in our 40s and healthier than probably 90% of our peers that we know personally.
A lot of people in the lower 30s, but well, let me tell you something. It's not the protein that's killing bodybuilders' kidneys.
No, it's probably some of the drugs and some of the other crazy, extreme weight loss and some of that stuff that's probably doing that. But yeah, for sure.
Any links between diet and schizophrenia? Absolutely.
Yeah, there's my good friend Chris Palmer at Harvard University, and there's a company called Metabolic Minds. Jan Bazuki is sort of chairman. They're the family that started this video game called Roblox, and their son Matt had bipolar disorder, and he put it in remission with a ketogenic diet, kind of an animal-based ketogenic diet, I believe. But there's actually a couple papers out there that shows a very clear link between schizophrenia and low carb ketogenic and animal-based diets. And so that's actually been published in the literature. So absolutely, we've got, I know several people with schizophrenia that have completely managed it by going carnivore. So yes, absolutely.
Well, I do believe there's a huge link between diet and mental.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. There is. Yeah. Yeah, you think about why we got so many damn crazy people walking around the planet. I mean, like in America, one out of 4 people has some sort of mental health disorder, and when you get all those people together, when you get a crowd of 20 people, you got something like 5 of them are nuts, right? Or I mean, I don't want to be goofy about this, but you get a lot of people that have mental health, anxiety, depression, violence, OCD, ADHD. You got all these people together, and then bad things happen because they can't play nice.
And in my experience, a lot of the people with anxiety and depression, they do not want to face the fact that even some simple diet modification could completely help. It's pop a pill.
Well, a lot of times they get in that they're addicted. I mean, they get into this through various addictions and addiction to food, and maybe they have overlying substance abuse on top of that. It's a tough place to be in, and that's where you need that hand holding and support. And you know, when you go to like it was kind of funny when I lived in California, next door to us was a kind of a halfway house. They had these women that were victims of drug, alcohol, whatever. And they were in there kind of sobering up, getting healthy, but they were just feeding them garbage. I mean, I'd sit there and they'd be on their back porch eating pizza and drinking Coke and smoking cigarettes. And I was like, how the hell are they going to get healthy doing that? You know, but they're like, well, at least they're not drinking. But I mean, they're just substituting. They're just substituting garbage, sugary, high stuff for this stuff. And so, yes, absolutely 100% nutrition plays a huge role in addiction. It plays a huge role in depression, anxiety. In fact, there's another study that was just done looking at people with anxiety and depression. 7 weeks, anxiety went away. 12 weeks, depression went away using a animal-based ketogenic diet. So absolutely.
Jeff Johnson's got a great comment here. He says, my son was diagnosed with ADD. His brain scan was wild. We told them no on the meds and stopped all fast foods at the house. In 3 weeks, he was normal and scans were like he was sleeping.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's kind of crazy that our poor kids, I mean, it's tough because kids these days are eating 70% of their diet is ultra processed food. A lot of them are becoming diabetic. A lot of them are becoming obese. A lot of them are developing mental health disorders. A lot of them think they're boys when they're girls or whatever. I mean, it's crazy times we're living with all this horrible food.
It is.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's another one I solved here. I don't know. I forgot. Grab my attention. I probably got too much sugar in my brain right now. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I know, Doc, you just had, I think you had a couple of videos talking about coffee and carnivore. I hadn't had a chance to click on those yet. That's one thing I've been trying to scale back from. I used to, I don't know, drink like 6 cups of coffee a day. I think it's good for you. But I've been scaling that way back. What's your thoughts on coffee with carnivore? You know, kind of, I know you don't like coffee. You don't drink coffee. You never have. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, if somebody's going carnivore and they're drinking coffee, I tell them leave that alone. Don't mess with that because there's too much other stuff going on. You don't need to be going through caffeine withdrawals and having all the headaches that are associated with that. You know, if you do carnivore and you get used to it, you train it 3-4 months into it, you say, hey, and you're still having issues, you may say, hey, let me see what happens if I kick out the coffee. And what I've seen in the people that do that, literally it's like 50-50. I mean, it's like 50% of the people will notice some sort of significant improvement. The other half doesn't. Now, if you're drinking 6-8 cups a day, yeah, that's probably an issue. You probably dial that back to 1 or 2 in the morning because, you know, coffee, I mean, what happens is you literally go through withdrawal every day. That's why you wake up in the morning, you can't function until you get your coffee because you're literally going through caffeine withdrawal. And it's just this vicious cycle. And of course, you know, caffeine, you know, it has some appetite modulating effects, which may cause you to undereat. And perhaps, you know, I mean, some people like it because it suppresses their appetite. It may cause gut issues. It may interrupt mineral absorption. Obviously, it affects our sleep depending how late we're doing it. It has some benefits. You know, it's a stimulant. It has some ergogenic impacts on exercise. You know, you can exercise at a higher intensity with a lower heart rate. But, you know, what's the trade-off there? So I tell people, go carnivore. If you're drinking coffee, leave it alone. You know, just keep using it if you're doing it. And then you can, you know, later, once you've adapted to the diet, you can decide if you want to keep it or drop it.
Brandy Markham says, I'm on a statin even though my cholesterol is normal, baby aspirin, blood thinner for the first year. I do have a family history of heart issues. My question is, what foods do I need to stay away from?
I think we need to provide a little context because in an earlier comment, she had said, I think she's probably younger than us, maybe 30s. And she says in August, she had a stent put into the Widowmaker and she's 130 pounds, perfect blood work otherwise. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I don't know, I mean, yeah, 130 pound perfect blood work. So, I mean, obviously not obese. She is.
Oh, we know her personally and she looks phenomenal. So,
yeah. And so it doesn't sound like she had high cholesterol to start with. So this is another thing. Why does she need a stent if she has normal cholesterol? Right. And that's the reality. So what are the other things that are going on? Maybe she has some anomalous, structure in there. That could be, it's probably not. It's probably, I don't know what her chronic condition has been. Maybe she has some level of a diet that was higher in carbs, higher in sugar or something like that. I mean, you can compensate for that. I mean, you see that when, you know, it's interesting. You see that in athletes. You see that in particularly endurance athletes. They'll actually have higher amounts of calcium in their heart than non-athletes in some cases, even though it changes. There's more density versus volume, and that's a more nuanced discussion. But I think that anything, from a dietary standpoint, anything that's going to be inflammatory producing, because that is going to contribute to cardiovascular disease. Anything that's going to lead to probably poor glycemic control, so highly refined carbohydrates, starches, things like that. Those are things I would personally avoid. I think that, it's obviously hard to give advice, and this isn't actual medical advice, but it's just some commentary without knowing the whole picture. I mean, obviously she's young, she's had a stent in place. They're going to say, hey, let's keep your cholesterol down to nothing. Let's get it as low as possible. And again, that is probably not necessarily unreasonable strategy, but if it ignores some of these other things, that would be my concern, because you already developed heart disease without high cholesterol, presumably. And so it's like, what else could be going on? There's another risk factor, which is called LP little a. And so we talk about ApoB and LDL, and LP little a is a little known risk factor, which is very, very potent. And the interesting thing is, it's kind of interesting because there are people that have had heart attacks with cholesterol being effectively zero, right? And they'll say, well, there was some LP little a, and that's what the residual risk was from. And they'll tell you that the problem with LP little a is there's nothing you can do. There's no drugs to treat it, and healthy diet doesn't help, right? But then you're like, what do you mean by healthy diet? Well, low-fat diet doesn't help this. But you know what does help it? Saturated fat. So there's studies that show if you eat more saturated fat, that LP little a goes down, but they don't want to say that because they're scared of saturated fat. Well, that's not a healthy diet. So anyway, I'd have to have more information to say that, but I would certainly avoid things that made you obese. I would certainly avoid things that cause inflammation. I would certainly avoid things that cause poor glycemic control. Okay.
Why is it that meat doesn't cause the inflammation that we see caused by carbs, grains, and some of these other foods?
Well, I think that, when we talk about inflammation, I think it starts in the gut. I think most disease starts in the gut. There's a saying, all disease starts in the gut. You think about how we interact with the world as an organism. Our skin, there's a large surface area of skin that's in contact with stuff, but our skin is waterproof. It's designed to keep stuff out. If you cut your skin, that's when you get the infection. But normally, bacteria, it's whatever. It's just waterproof. It's not getting in there. The gut, believe it or not, our mouth, our stomach, our intestines are all external to the body. That tube, the inside of that tube, is like a hose. The inside of that hose is actually external to our body tissues. It's outside of our cells, right? It's just a hollow tube. It's like a donut. It's like the whole of the donut. That's outside of the donut. And so the surface area of our skin is about 1.73 meters for an average size human. I'm probably 2.5 because I'm bigger. But the surface area of our gut is like the size of a tennis court, right? Wow. Because we have all these villi and microvilli. And not only that, our gut is not waterproof. It's not designed to keep stuff out. It's designed to bring things in. If it didn't, we would all starve to death, right? Mm-hmm. So we have this huge surface area, the largest surface area in our body that is connected to the external world. And it's got this selective membrane that keeps some stuff out, it lets some stuff in. But if that membrane gets damaged by irritants, gut irritants, antibiotics, medication, supplements, certain foods, thickeners, emulsifiers, processed food, then what happens? So now we're bringing in stuff that we're not supposed to bring in. That sets up this inflammatory cascade, this autoimmune, immune system cascade, and that's why we get these inflammatory things. And so beef, on the other hand, doesn't have any of those compounds. It's well tolerated. I mean, we are literally designed to eat meat. I mean, our gut is perfect. You think about it, we talk about the microbiome. We use the microbiome as important because it breaks down these fibers and stuff like that. Well, guess what? You can cut the colon out of a human being. They'll live a normal, fine life. They don't need it, right? But if you don't have that perfect microbiome dialed in and you start eating all these plant foods, guess what happens? All these problems with your gut, right? So, but with meat, you don't need that. You need an acidic stomach and you need a small intestine. And that's why you don't poop much, because it's all getting absorbed. The only poop, when you're on a carnivore diet, all your poop is dead cells, some digestive juice, and a little bit of bacteria. That's it. But when you eat all this fiber and plant material, most of that, when's the last time you saw a piece of steak in your poop, right? Never in your life. Corn, broken down plant material. You see it all the time. You talk to any gastroenterologist, they never see poop in the colon, right? That's just crazy.
Yeah, that is.
Last question for you, Doc. One of the questions that several people asked was, what's your thoughts on intermittent fasting, and how does that relate to carnivore, or do you tie that in? Good, bad, indifferent? What's your thoughts?
Well, I think in general, most people, we graze all day. I mean, right now in America, we eat, we get up at 7, we eat breakfast, we have a snack at 10, we have lunch, 2 o'clock, we're hungry again, we dinner at 5, we have a late night snack at 8, maybe we have something, we get up at midnight to eat. So eating all the time is not consistent with good health. I think that's a problem. I think we are designed, if you think that we were at one point a hunter-gatherer species, and we were, let's go, we're going to go out for a hunt, we're walking around, and I said, hey, Gary, I'm hungry. I need to stop every 2 hours to eat. You'd be like, what the, and I got to set up a campfire and cook everything. I mean, it's just not practical. So I think the human existence for most of it was eating larger meals less frequently. Yeah. And I think that's the reality of not having a microwave and Tupperware. And, you think about it, how much work does it take to prepare a meal in the field when you don't, when you barely have a knife, you're cutting things with a rock, You want
to eat and get really full and not have to do it again for a while.
Right. So, I mean, that's kind of how we're designed. And when you eat carnivore, that's what happens. Most people fall into this natural rhythm of eating like usually twice a day. That's what happens. And it's because you're not hungry. And I think this is what we're set up for. So that kind of naturally causes this intermittent fast, which I think is fine. And I think, for some people who's kind of their appetite's all screwed up and broken from eating garbage for years, they have to set up a clock. They have to say, I'm going to eat in a 6-hour window or an 8-hour window or a 4-hour window. And they have to be very disciplined about that. I generally eat, they're almost every day. I probably eat my last meal early afternoon, early evening, and then I don't eat again until maybe 11 or 12 o'clock the next day. So I generally am fasting 16, 18 hours a day, just naturally. I don't think about it. I don't set a stopwatch. I'm not even that hungry. By the time it's time for me to eat, I'm starting to get a little hungry, and it works out well. So I think intermittent fasting is fine. I think the diet should set it up naturally. It's really hard to fast on a high carb diet. It's challenging because you're constantly thinking about food. You have these blood sugars, ups and downs, and you're just obsessed with food. When you're on a high carb diet, you're thinking about it all the time. I have what's for lunch, what's for snack, what restaurant am I going to, what recipe am I going to cook? It's just like
when to start.
Right. It becomes almost an obsessive thinking, and you spend so much enormous time and valuable brain power just thinking about food. And this is something that just kind of takes it away.
Absolutely.
All right, folks. Well, I think we are going to wrap it up right there. Doc, thanks so much for coming on. That was really awesome. I think a lot of people are going to benefit from this discussion. And man, just thank you for what you do. Thank you. Just keep doing what you're doing, I guess. And we really do appreciate you coming on so much.
Well, appreciate it myself. Appreciate it as well. Thanks for having me. And if I can do this another time, you want me to come on, let me know, and I'll be happy to do it.
We will definitely do that. Hang tight right there. We'll end this. We'll talk a little offline. But folks, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you guys share this. We will be putting this one up on Spotify as well. And of course, it will be in perpetuity there on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble. So share this stuff. I think it will benefit a lot of people. And I think a lot of questions that a lot of people have are going to be answered through watching this. So share this. I think it's important. But until next time, stay armed, stay ready. We'll talk to you soon.